She stumbled through the barn door at dawn, wearing a blood-stained wedding dress, and the animals that were supposed to be dead lifted their heads when she touched them. The man holding the rifle didn't know whether to shoot her or beg her to stay. But by the time the sun had fully risen, his decision would change everything. If you want to see how a woman everyone called cursed became the most dangerous thing the frontier ever tried to break, stay until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button, and let's begin. The wedding dress had once been white. Now it dragged through the dirt like something dragged from a grave, the hem blackened with mud and torn where Lila Whitaker had stumbled through sage and stone in the darkness. The bodice, carefully hand-stitched by her aunt over many weeks, hung loose at the shoulders where she had clawed at the buttons, desperate to breathe after Garrett Shaw left her standing alone at the church door. Lila didn't remember leaving town. She only remembered the low murmur of voices behind her and the pitying stares that cut sharper than knives. Someone had laughed. She couldn't recall who, but the sound had burned itself into her skull like a brand. So she had walked away from the church, away from the boarding house where she had been living on borrowed grace, away from everything familiar, until her feet bled through her ruined satin shoes, and the night swallowed her whole. The barn appeared just as the first hint of gray touched the horizon. Lila almost missed it. A dark shape hunched against the hills like something trying to hide. She didn't care what it was. Shelter meant survival. That was all that mattered now. The door hung crooked on leather hinges. Lila slipped inside and pulled it shut behind her, leaning against the rough wood while her heart hammered against her ribs. The smell hit her immediately. Sickness, not the sharp tang of manure or moldy hay, but something deeper, something wrong. Lila had grown up around animals. Her mother had kept chickens and goats behind their house in St. Louis before the fever took her, and she knew the scent of death creeping into living things. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the darkness. Stalls lined both walls in the dim pre-dawn light, filtering through gaps in the boards. Lila could make out shapes moving weakly in the shadows. A horse nickered softly, the sound thin and breathy, like something drowning. Lila's mother used to say she had a gift. Not magic, nothing superstitious or sinful, just a sense for what ailed creatures that couldn't speak for themselves. Her mother would press her palm to a goat's flank, close her eyes, and somehow know. Twisted gut, bad feed, poison in the water. She had taught Lila the same strange attentiveness, though Lila had never fully understood how it worked. She only knew that sometimes when she touched an animal, she could feel what was wrong. The nearest stall held a gray mare. her dark coat slick with sweat despite the cool morning. Lila approached slowly, making the soft clicking sound her mother had taught her. The horse's head lolled toward her, ears flat. "Easy," Lila whispered. "I'm not here to hurt you." She reached through the slats and rested her hand on the mare's neck. The horse flinched, but didn't pull away. Fever. Lila felt it immediately, a wrongness radiating from deep in the animal's belly. Not colic, not founder. Something toxic moving through the mare's system like slow poison. Without thinking, Lila unlatched the stall door and stepped inside. The mare's legs trembled. White foam crusted at the corners of her mouth. "What did they feed you?" Lila murmured, running her hands along the horse's flank over her distended belly. "What got into you?" The mare's breathing evened slightly under her touch. Lila kept her palms steady, fingers tracing the hard ridge of the animal's spine. She closed her eyes and let herself feel. There, in the gut, something sharp and chemical burned through tissue it shouldn't touch. Lila's eyes snapped open. "Water," she whispered. "It's in the water." A rifle cocked behind her. Lila spun, heart lurching into her throat. A man stood in the barn doorway, silhouetted against the growing dawn. Tall, broad-shouldered, the rifle pointed directly at her chest. "Give me one reason," he said, voice low and rough as gravel. "Why I shouldn't assume you're here to finish stealing what your kind already took." Lila's hands shot up. The mare shifted behind her, blowing air through her nostrils. I didn't take anything. I was just trespassing. In your barn, at dawn, wearing a wedding dress." The man stepped forward. Lila could see him better now. Dark hair, older than her by perhaps 10 years, face carved into hard lines by sun and work. His eyes were the color of creek stone, and they held no warmth whatsoever. "Try again." "I needed shelter." Lila's voice came out steadier than she expected. "That's all. I'll leave. I'm sorry." "You'll leave when I say you can leave." He didn't lower the rifle. "Who sent you?" "Nobody sent me. I don't even know where I am." The man's jaw tightened. "You expect me to believe you just wandered onto my land in a wedding dress by accident? I expect you to shoot me or let me go," Lila said. "But I don't expect you to believe anything." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. He studied her for a long moment, gaze moving from her ruined dress to her bleeding feet to the mare standing calm behind her. "That horse was dying yesterday," he said slowly. "Wouldn't let anyone near her." Lila glanced back at the mare. The animal's breathing had steadied even more. "She's still sick, but no longer thrashing." "She's poisoned," Lila said. "They all are, aren't they? The whole herd." The rifle lowered an inch. What did you say? It's in the water. Something chemical. Probably runoff from somewhere upstream. It's burning through their systems. Lila turned back to the mare, keeping her movements slow. How long have they been sick? Weeks. The man's voice had changed, still wary, but with an edge of desperation underneath. Lost several already. Vet said there was nothing to be done. Your vet's an idiot. Lila ran her hand along the mare's neck again. The horse leaned into her touch. They need clean water, fresh hay, and something to bind the toxins before they tear through what's left of the tissue. The man stared at her. How do you know that? My mother taught me. Before she died. Silence stretched between them. Dawn light crept further into the barn, illuminating dust motes hanging in the air. Somewhere outside, a rooster crowed. The man finally lowered the rifle completely. Rafe Donovan, this is my ranch. Lila Whitaker. She paused. Or it was. I don't know what my name is anymore. Rafe's eyes dropped to her ring finger. No band, no mark where one had been. What happened to you? He asked. Lila's throat tightened. I made a mistake, and everyone I knew made sure I paid for it. She expected mockery, pity. Instead, Rafe just nodded once, as if he understood something she hadn't said out loud. Can you really help them? He gestured at the stalls around them. The animals. Lila looked at the mare, then at the other horses visible in the dim light, all showing the same symptoms, all dying slowly, while no one knew how to save them. Maybe, she said, if you let me try. Rafe was quiet for a long time. Lila could see him weighing options, calculating risks. She was a stranger, a woman alone, someone clearly running from something. But his animals were dying. You can stay in the spare room in the main house, he said finally. Work for room and board. If you can save even one more horse, it's worth the risk. Lila's chest constricted. She had expected to be thrown off the property, arrested, maybe worse. Why would you trust me? She whispered. Rafe's expression didn't change. I don't. But that mare hasn't let anyone touch her in days, and she's standing calm as Sunday morning with your hand on her neck. So either you're a witch, or you know something nobody else does. Either way, I'm desperate enough not to care which. He turned toward the door, then paused. Get yourself cleaned up. There's a pump around back. I'll bring you something that isn't a torn wedding dress to wear, Mr. Donovan. Rafe, he interrupted. Just Rafe. Lila nodded slowly. Thank you. He didn't answer, just walked out of the barn, leaving her standing alone with the dying horses and the first fragile thread of hope she had felt since Garrett Shaw had shattered her life. The sun rose fully while Lila washed at the pump behind the barn. The water was ice cold, but she scrubbed at her arms and face until her skin stung. The wedding dress would have to be burned. Even if she could clean it, she never wanted to see it again. Rafe returned carrying a bundle of clothes, men's work trousers, a faded cotton shirt, and a leather belt. "These were my wife's," he said, without preamble. "She was about your size." Lila took them carefully. "Your wife? Dead. Years ago." His tone left no room for questions. "Get dressed, then I'll show you the rest of the herd." She changed behind the barn, fingers clumsy on the unfamiliar buttons. The clothes smelled of cedar and dust. They fit well enough. When she emerged, Rafe was waiting with 2 horses saddled. He handed her the reins to a gentle-looking bay gelding. "You ride? Not well. You'll learn." He swung onto his own mount with practiced ease. "We've got a large herd scattered across the north pasture. Half of them are showing symptoms." Lila climbed onto the bay, gripping the saddle horn tighter than she wanted to admit. The horse shifted beneath her, but didn't bolt. They rode out across land that seemed to stretch forever under the pale morning sky. The ranch sprawled across rolling hills dotted with sage and scrub oak. In the distance, mountains rose like broken teeth against the horizon. "How much land?" Lila asked. "Thousands of acres." Rafe's voice carried a thread of pride beneath the exhaustion. "Bought it with my wife years ago. Built everything from nothing." Lila could see the evidence of that work everywhere. Fences stretching into the distance, a windmill turning slowly on a far ridge, irrigation ditches carved into the hillsides. This was a place someone had fought to build. What happened to her? The question slipped out before she could stop it. "Your wife?" Rafe's jaw tightened. "Pneumonia took her in a matter of days. I wasn't here. I was in town buying supplies. By the time I got back, she was already gone." The pain in his voice was old, but not healed. Lila recognized it. She had heard the same tone in her own voice when she spoke about her mother. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Rafe just nodded. They rode in silence until they crested a hill, and Lila saw the herd below. Cattle moved slowly across the grassland, but even from a distance she could see something was wrong. Too many lying down, too much lethargy in the way they moved. "There," Rafe said, pointing to a creek cutting through the valley. "That's the water source for this section. If you're right about contamination, it's coming from upstream." Lila studied the creek's path. It wound down from the northern hills, disappearing into a narrow canyon. "What's up there?" "Old mining operation. Abandoned years ago." Rafe's expression darkened. "Or supposed to be abandoned." Lila urged her horse forward, picking her way down the slope. The cattle barely reacted as she approached. Another bad sign. Healthy animals would have moved away from an unfamiliar rider. She dismounted near the closest cow, a big red heifer lying on her side. The animal's breathing was labored, sides heaving. Lila placed her palm on the cow's flank. The fever was there, the same toxic burn working through the digestive system. "It's the same," she said. "All of them drinking from poisoned water." Rafe swung down from his horse. "Can you fix it?" "Not fix it," Lila said, brushing dirt from her borrowed trousers. "But I can maybe keep them alive long enough for their bodies to fight it off. We need to cut them off from this water source, drive them to clean water, and we need to do it fast." Rafe looked at the sky, calculating. "That's a long, grueling drive for a herd this size, and I'm down several hands because they left for better pay weeks ago. How many workers do you have left?" "4, plus me." He met her eyes. "Plus you, if you're willing." Lila had never driven cattle in her life. She had never done ranch work of any kind, but she had also never had anywhere else to go. "Tell me what to do," she said. The ranch hands stared at Lila like she had crawled out of hell. There were 4 of them gathered in front of the bunkhouse when Rafe rode up with Lila behind him. 2 were young, barely out of boyhood, with sunburned faces and suspicious eyes. The 3rd was older, Mexican, with gray threading through his dark hair. The 4th was a woman, rail-thin and hard-faced, wearing men's clothes and a gun on her hip. Rafe dismounted. "This is Lila Whitaker. She's going to help us save the herd." The silence was deafening. Finally, the older man spoke. "Boss, with respect, we don't need another mouth to feed. We need experienced hands." "She knows what's poisoning the cattle, Mateo." Rafe's tone left no room for argument. "Which is more than the vet figured out." The woman snorted. "She a veterinarian?" "No, Ren." Rafe's patience was clearly fraying. "But she's what we've got." Mateo's eyes moved over Lila, taking in the borrowed clothes, the bare feet still bloody from her walk through the wilderness. "Where'd she come from?" "That's not your concern." Rafe's voice dropped into something dangerous. "What is your concern is getting those cattle moved to the south pasture before we lose the whole herd. Lila says it's the water. We're cutting them off from the creek and driving them to clean grazing." One of the younger hands, fair-haired with a weak chin, shook his head. "That's days of work." "Then we work days," Rafe interrupted. "Or we watch the herd die slowly. Your choice." Nobody argued after that, but Lila could feel their resentment like a physical weight as Rafe divided up assignments. Mateo and Ren would take the north flank. The 2 younger hands, Levi and Cole, would cover the south. Rafe would lead from the front, and Lila would ride drag, pushing stragglers from behind. "You know what drag means?" Ren asked, eyeing Lila with open skepticism. "I can guess." It means eating everyone else's dust and getting kicked by every stubborn cow that decides she doesn't want to move." Ren's smile was sharp. "Think you can handle that in your delicate condition?" Lila met her stare without flinching. "I'll manage." Ren's smile faded. She turned and walked toward the corral without another word. Mateo lingered. "You really know what's wrong with them?" he asked quietly. Lila nodded. "Toxins in the water. Something chemical leaching from the old mine." Mateo's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "My father worked those mines before they closed. He died coughing blood years later. I'm sorry. If you're right about the water, you might save this herd." Mateo tilted his head slightly. "But don't expect gratitude. People around here don't trust easy." "I noticed." Mateo almost smiled. "Get yourself some boots. You'll need them." Lila found boots in the tack room, worn leather that had belonged to Rafe's wife. They were slightly too big, but she stuffed the toes with cloth until they fit well enough. By the time she returned to the corral, the others were already saddling horses. Rafe handed her the reins to the bay gelding again. "His name is Copper. He's steady. Won't throw you unless you do something stupid." Lila stroked the horse's neck. "What counts as stupid? You'll know when it happens." Rafe swung onto his own mount, a big buckskin stallion that danced sideways, eager to move. "Stay behind the herd. Push them forward, but don't crowd them. If one breaks off, circle around and bring her back. Don't get between a cow and her calf." Lila's stomach twisted. "That's a lot of rules. You'll figure it out." Rafe looked at her for a moment, something unreadable in his expression. "Or you'll get trampled. Either way, we're burning daylight." They rode out at full dawn, spreading across the pasture in a loose line. Lila took her position at the rear, heart hammering. Mateo whistled sharply. The sound cut across the valley like a whip crack. The cattle began to move. It was chaos from the first moment. The herd didn't flow like a river, the way Lila had imagined. They bunched and scattered, cows breaking off to circle back toward the creek, calves bawling for mothers, bulls squaring up to challenge the riders. Lila quickly learned that eating dust wasn't a metaphor. The air turned thick with it as hundreds of hooves churned the dry ground. She pulled her bandana over her nose and mouth, eyes watering. A heifer broke from the herd, trotting determinedly back toward the contaminated water. Lila urged Copper forward, circling wide the way Rafe had instructed. The heifer changed direction, but didn't rejoin the group, just stood there, stubborn and feverish, sides heaving. Lila dismounted. The heifer's eyes rolled white. "Easy," Lila murmured, approaching slowly. "I know you feel awful. I know the water sounds good, but it's killing you." She reached out carefully and pressed her palm to the heifer's neck. The animal flinched, but didn't bolt. Lila closed her eyes and felt bitter toxins burning through the gut, but underneath something still fighting. This one could survive if they got her to clean water fast enough. "Come on," Lila whispered. "Let's go." She walked back toward Copper, and after a moment, the heifer followed. Lila mounted and guided both animals back to the herd, feeling a small flicker of triumph. Ren rode past, expression hard. "Don't celebrate yet. We've got plenty more just as stubborn." By midday, Lila's entire body ached. Her thighs burned from gripping the saddle. Her hands were blistered from the reins. Dust coated her throat, making every breath taste like dirt. But the herd was moving, slowly, painfully, but moving. Rafe rode up and down the line, checking positions, shouting encouragement. Lila watched him work, efficient, tireless, never asking anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. He had built this ranch from nothing. She could see that in every movement, every decision. Late in the day, the herd reached a dry riverbed cutting across their path. Most of the cattle crossed without issue, but several sick cows balked at the drop, too weak to make the jump. Lila dismounted and approached the nearest cow. She was older, ribs showing through her hide, breathing wet and labored. "She's dying," Levi said, riding up beside Lila. "Best to leave her." Lila shook her head. "Not yet." She pressed both hands to the cow's side, feeling the familiar wrongness spreading through the animal's body. Worse than the others. The poison had been working longer here, but the cow's heart still beat strong. She was a fighter. Lila began humming low and rhythmic, the same melody her mother used to sing when a goat was struggling through a hard birth. She didn't know why it worked, only that sometimes when the animals were scared or hurting, the sound calmed them. The cow's breathing evened, her muscles relaxed slightly. Lila kept humming and gently guided the animal toward the riverbed edge. 1 step, 2. The cow resisted, but Lila stayed patient, hands steady. Finally, the cow jumped. She landed hard but didn't fall. Lila crossed behind her and urged her forward to rejoin the herd. When she looked up, all 4 ranch hands were staring at her. "What the hell was that?" Cole asked, voice pitched high with shock. Lila shrugged, throat too dry to explain. Mateo was the first to look away. "Keep moving," he said gruffly. "We're losing light." But Lila caught the way he watched her after that, wary but no longer dismissive, like maybe she was something other than dead weight. They made camp as the sun touched the western hills. The herd settled into uneasy rest in a natural box canyon that would hold them through the night. The riders built a fire and broke out hardtack and jerky. Lila sat apart from the others, too exhausted to eat. Her hands shook when she tried to open her canteen. Rafe appeared beside her, holding a tin cup. "Coffee," he said. "It's terrible, but it's hot." Layla took it gratefully. The coffee tasted like it had been boiled over old nails, but the warmth helped. "You did good today," Rafe said. "I barely kept up." "You kept up. That's more than I expected." He settled onto the ground beside her, stretching his long legs toward the fire. "That thing you did with the cow at the riverbed. The humming," Lila tensed. "My mother taught me. I know it sounds rude." "It worked," Rafe interrupted. "That's all I care about." Lila studied his profile in the firelight. Hard features, but not cruel. Tired eyes that had seen too much loss. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked quietly. "Letting me stay." Rafe was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "When my wife died, people told me to sell the ranch, move on. Said there was nothing left here worth fighting for." He looked at Lila. "But she built this place with me. Every fence post, every corral. I couldn't let it die, just because she did." Leela understood. "So you're holding on every day." Rafe's jaw tightened. "And every day, something tries to take it from me. Drought, rustlers, sickness, rich ranchers wanting to expand." He gestured at the herd. "These cattle are all I've got left. If they die, the ranch dies. And if the ranch dies..." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. "I won't let them die," Lila said. The words came out stronger than she intended. "I'll do whatever it takes." Rafe looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once and stood. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be harder." The next day was harder. The heat rose early and stayed brutal. The cattle moved slower, weakened by sickness and stress. 2 calves collapsed and had to be carried on horseback. 1 cow died in the middle of the trail, just dropped and didn't get up again. Lila felt it like a personal failure. "You can't save them all," Mateo said when he saw her face. "Some are too far gone." But Lila couldn't accept that. She pushed herself harder, rode longer, refused to rest, even when Rafe ordered her to take a break. By mid-afternoon, she was swaying in the saddle. Ren rode up beside her. "You're going to fall and get trampled," she said flatly. "Drink some water before you pass out." Leela reached for her canteen and realized it was empty. She couldn't remember the last time she had taken a drink. Ren swore and handed over her own canteen. "You're either the toughest woman I've ever met or the dumbest. Haven't decided which." Lila drank deeply. "Can it be both?" Ren almost smiled. "Yeah, probably." They reached clean water just before sunset. The herd smelled it and surged forward, desperate. Lila had to fight to keep them from trampling each other in their rush to drink. When the cattle finally settled, spread across good grazing land with a clear stream running through it, Lila dismounted and nearly collapsed. Rafe caught her arm. "Easy. I'm fine. You're dead on your feet." He guided her toward the fire Mateo was building. "Sit. Eat. That's an order." Leela sank down gratefully. Her vision swam. Cole appeared with a plate of beans and bacon. "You actually did it," he said, voice surprised. "We didn't lose more than a dozen." "A dozen's too many," Lila said. "A dozen out of a large herd is a miracle," Mateo corrected. He crouched beside the fire, studying her with new respect. "The boss made the right call, bringing you in." Lila looked across the fire at Rafe. He was talking to Ren, pointing at something in the distance, but he must have felt her gaze because he glanced over and met her eyes. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or the beginning of trust. Lila looked away first, heart doing something complicated in her chest. "Get some sleep," Mateo said. "Tomorrow we start figuring out how to keep them healthy." They stayed with the herd for several more days, while Lila taught the ranch hands how to identify the sickest animals and dose them with a mixture she made from charcoal and clay, something her mother had used to bind toxins in poisoned goats. It was crude medicine, half guesswork, but it worked. The cattle began to improve. Fevers dropped, breathing eased. By the end of the week, even the weakest cows were back on their feet. Rafe sent Levi and Cole back to the main ranch to handle the other livestock. Mateo and Ren stayed with the herd, while Rafe and Lila rode up into the northern hills to find the source of the contamination. They found it a short distance upstream from where the cattle had been drinking. The old mine entrance gaped like a wound in the hillside, timbers rotted and collapsing. Water seeped from the opening, carrying a greenish tint that made Lila's stomach turn. "Copper runoff," Rafe said grimly, "leaching from the old shafts. Can it be stopped?" "Not without money I don't have." Rafe dismounted and walked closer, studying the water flow. "I'll need to fence off this whole section. Move the herd permanently." Lila could see the calculation in his eyes, the cost in materials, labor, time, everything this ranch didn't have to spare. "I'll help," she said. Rafe looked at her. "You've already helped, more than you know." "I'm not done yet." Lila slid off Copper and walked to stand beside Rafe at the mine entrance. "You gave me a place when I had nothing. Let me earn it." Rafe's expression softened slightly. "You're not what I expected when I found you in my barn." "What did you expect? Someone broken?" He studied her face. "But you're not broken, just bent." Leela's throat tightened. "Maybe, or maybe I just haven't realized it yet." Rafe reached out and gripped her shoulder briefly. "We'll figure it out together." They rode back to camp as the sword. painting the hills golden red. Lila felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. But that night, as she lay in her bedroll under the stars, listening to the cattle settle and the ranch hands' quiet conversation around the fire, she heard Wren say something that made her blood run cold. "You hear Vivian Langford is back in town." Mateo's response was too quiet to catch, but Rafe's voice carried clear across the camp. "I don't care what Vivian does. She's not my concern anymore." "She's making you her concern," Wren said. "Word is she's been asking questions about the ranch, about some woman you hired." "Silence. Let her ask," Rafe said finally. "It's none of her business." But Lila heard the tension in his voice, and she understood with the cold certainty of someone who had already lost everything once that trouble was coming. She just didn't know how bad it would be. Vivian Langford arrived at the ranch soon after in a carriage that cost more than most men earned in a year. Lila was mucking out stalls when she heard the commotion. Horses whinnying, Cole's voice raised in greeting, the creak of expensive wheels on the dirt road leading to the main house. She straightened, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, and walked to the barn door. The woman who stepped down from the carriage looked like she had been carved from porcelain and dressed by someone who had never seen honest dirt. Her traveling dress was deep emerald silk, fitted perfectly to a tiny waist. Her hat perched at an angle that had to be deliberate, decorated with feathers Lila couldn't name. Everything about her screamed money and breeding, and a life lived far from places where animals died and work destroyed your hands. Rafe emerged from the house, and Lila saw his whole body go rigid. "Vivian, Rafe." The woman's voice was smooth as cream, with an accent that marked her as Eastern educated. "You look well. Frontier life agrees with you. What are you doing here?" Vivian's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Is that any way to greet an old friend? I've come all the way from Boston to see how you're managing." "I'm managing fine. Yes, I can see that." Vivian's gaze swept across the ranch yard, taking in the worn fences, the patched barn roof, the chickens scratching in the dirt. Her expression said everything her words didn't. "Though I imagine it's been difficult running a place this size alone." "I'm not alone." Rafe's tone could have cut glass. "I have good people working here." "Of course." Vivian's eyes landed on Lila, still standing in the barn doorway, covered in horse manure and hay. "Is that one of them?" Lila felt the assessment like a slap. She knew exactly what Vivian saw. A woman in men's clothes, hair escaping from a messy braid, hands calloused and dirty. Nothing refined or proper about her. Rafe's jaw tightened. "That's Lila Whitaker. She's the reason I still have a herd." "How industrious." Vivian's smile sharpened. You always did have a talent for finding strays. Lila's temper flared, but before she could respond, Mateo appeared at her elbow. "Boss needs us to check the south fence line," he said quietly. "Storm damage." It was a lie. There had been no storm. But Lila recognized an exit when she heard one. "Of course," she said, forcing her voice steady. She walked past Vivian without another glance, feeling the woman's eyes boring into her back. Mateo waited until they were out of earshot before speaking. "That's trouble," I gathered. "She and a boss were engaged once, years back, before he married Lena. Vivian went east for finishing school. Told Rafe she'd be back in a year. She stayed gone 3. By the time she returned, Rafe had already married." Lila's stomach dropped. She wanted him back. Still does, from the look of it. Mateo glanced back toward the house where Vivian and Rafe still stood talking. "Vivian's father owns half the territory. Banking, railroads, mining. She's used to getting what she wants. What does she want with Rafe's ranch? It's barely profitable." Mateo's look was shrewd. "Maybe it ain't about the ranch." Lila felt something twist in her chest. She had been at the ranch only a short time. She had no claim on Rafe Donovan, no right to feel anything about who visited him or why. But she felt it anyway. They worked the fence line until sunset, replacing posts that didn't need replacing, tightening wire that was already tight. When they finally returned to the main house, Vivian's carriage was gone. Rafe sat alone on the porch, a bottle of whiskey on the step beside him. He wasn't drinking, just staring out at the darkening hills. Lila hesitated, then climbed the porch steps. "She gone for now?" Rafe's voice was flat. "She's staying at the hotel in town. Says she's here to oversee some business interests for her father." "Is that true?" "Probably. Vivian doesn't do anything without multiple reasons." He finally looked at Lila. "I'm sorry about what she said. Calling you a stray." Lila sat down on the step below him. "I've been called worse recently." Rafe was quiet for a moment. "You never told me what happened before you showed up here." Lila pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. The night air was cooling fast, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. "His name was Garrett Shaw," she said finally. "He came through St. Louis, selling mining investments. Said he was from a good family in Denver, said he'd made his fortune in silver and was looking to settle down." Rafe didn't interrupt. "He courted me for months, proper and respectful. Met my aunt, went to church, did everything right." Lila's voice went hollow. "I thought he was decent, honest. When he proposed, my aunt cried. She was so happy." "What happened?" "Wedding day, I gave him access to my aunt's savings for the house he said we'd buy together for our future." Lila laughed bitterly. "He took it all, Everything my aunt had saved over decades. Then he disappeared before the ceremony even started. Rafe swore under his breath. The town blamed me, Lila continued. Said I should have known better, that a woman my age and unmarried should have been suspicious when a man like that showed interest. They called me Gibret, stupid. Some said I was probably in on it. That's insane. That's what people do when they need someone to blame. Lila rested her chin on her knees. My aunt wouldn't speak to me. Said I'd ruined her. The boarding house threw me out. I had nowhere to go and no money to get there anyway, so I walked until I found your barn. Rafe was quiet for a long time. Then he reached down and gripped her shoulder briefly, the same gesture he had made at the mine. You're not stupid, he said, and you're sure as hell not desperate. You survived something that would have broken most people. That takes strength. Lila's throat tightened. Some days I don't feel very strong. Strong people rarely do. Rafe stood, picking up the whiskey bottle. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start rebuilding the north fence. It's going to be brutal work. Lila watched him disappear into the house. Then she sat alone on the porch for a while longer, listening to the night sounds and trying to ignore the feeling that Vivian Langford's arrival had changed something fundamental. The next morning proved Rafe wasn't exaggerating about the fence work. They rode out at dawn with 2 pack horses loaded with wire, posts, and tools. The section they needed to repair stretched for miles across rocky terrain that fought them every step. Lila learned quickly that building fence was an art form involving physics, profanity, and sheer stubborn will. The posts had to be sunk deep in ground that seemed determined to reject them. The wire had to be strung tight enough to hold cattle, but not so tight it would snap in the wind. And every few hundred yards, the landscape threw new obstacles, boulders, gullies, slopes that made standing upright a challenge. By midday, Lila's hands were bleeding through her gloves. Her shoulders screamed. Sweat soaked through her shirt despite the cool air. Rafe worked beside her without complaint, setting posts with a rhythm born from years of practice. Mateo and Levi handled the wire, while Cole rode ahead, marking where the next post should go. You're doing good, Rafe said when they stopped to water the horses. He nodded at the section they had completed. Most people quit by now. Lila flexed her aching fingers. I'm too tired to quit. That's the secret. Stay too tired to know better. He handed her his canteen. Drink. We've got more to do before dark. They worked until the sun touched the western mountains, then made camp in a shallow draw, protected from the wind. Levi built a fire, while Mateo broke out supplies for dinner. Lila collapsed against her saddle and closed her eyes, too exhausted to move. She must have dozed off, because when she opened her eyes again, Full dark had fallen, and someone had draped a blanket over her. The fire crackled nearby. Low voices murmured in conversation. Lila sat up slowly. Her whole body protested. Rafe appeared with a tin plate. "Eat. You'll feel worse tomorrow if you don't." The food was simple. Beans, bacon, hardtack. But Lila was hungry enough not to care. She ate mechanically, while Rafe settled beside her. "You'll toughen up," he said. "First few weeks are the hardest." "How long did it take you to adjust to this life?" Rafe considered the question. "I grew up on a farm back east. Manual labor wasn't new, but the scale out here, the isolation, the constant fight against the land trying to kill you, that took time." He stared into the fire. "Lena adapted faster than I did. Honestly, she grew up in a city, never touched a cow before we moved west. But she learned everything. Riding, roping, branding. Worked harder than any hand I ever hired." Lila heard the pain beneath his words. "You miss her every day." Rafe's voice went rough, but the missing gets quieter over time. Like an old injury that aches when the weather changes, but doesn't stop you from working. Vivian didn't wait. "No." Rafe's expression hardened. She decided finishing school was more important than coming back. By the time she changed her mind, I'd already met Lena. Vivian never forgave me for that. Is that why she's here now? Rafe looked at Lila, firelight casting shadows across his face. "Vivian's here because she thinks she can still get what she wants. She always does, eventually. Her father makes sure of it. What does she want? This ranch? You both, probably." Rafe's jaw tightened. "Her father's been trying to buy me out for years. Says this land would be better used for railroad expansion or some damn thing. I keep refusing. So now Vivian shows up with her smiles and her pretty dresses, thinking she can convince me where money failed." Lila felt anger burn through her exhaustion. "She thinks you're that easy to manipulate. She thinks every man is." Rafe stood, brushing dirt from his pants. "But I didn't build this place to hand it over to someone who sees it as a business investment. This land means something. It costs something. And I'm not giving it up." The fierceness in his voice made Lila's chest tighten. She understood that feeling. The desperate need to hold on to something when the world kept trying to rip it away. They worked the fence line for several more days. By the end, Lila's hands had calloused over the blisters. Her muscles stopped screaming and settled into a constant ache she could work through. She learned to read the land, to spot good post sites, to judge wire tension by feel. And she learned to work beside Rafe with an easy rhythm that felt natural, like they had been doing this together for years instead of weeks. On the fourth day, they rode back to find Wren waiting with news. "Town's talking," she said without preamble. "About you, about Lila." Rafe's expression went dark. "What are they saying?" That you hired some woman nobody knows to work the ranch, that she's living in the main house." Wren's tone was carefully neutral, but her eyes flicked to Lila. "Some are saying it ain't proper. Others are saying worse." Lila's stomach sank. She should have expected this. A ruined woman living alone with a widower. Of course people would talk. "Let them talk," Rafe said flatly. "It ain't that simple, boss." Wren shifted her weight. "Vivian Langford has been visiting the church ladies, taking tea with the mayor's wife, asking questions about Lila's background, making concerned noises about propriety and Christian morals." Mateo swore in Spanish. Lila felt cold spread through her chest. "She's trying to ruin my reputation." "What reputation?" Wren's voice wasn't cruel, just factual. "No offense, but you showed up in a wedding dress with no explanation. Town already thinks you're trouble. Vivian is just confirming what they want to believe anyway." "That's enough," Rafe said sharply. "Lila's business is her own. Town can think whatever the hell they want." But Lila saw the calculation in his eyes. He was worried. A ranch owner's reputation mattered out here. Whispers about impropriety could cost him business, make it harder to hire good hands, damage relationships with suppliers. She was becoming a liability. "I can leave," Lila said quietly. "Find work somewhere else. You don't need this kind of trouble." "You're not leaving." Rafe's tone left no room for argument. "I don't give a damn what Vivian says or what the town thinks. You've earned your place here." "Have I?" Lila met his eyes. "Or are you just being stubborn?" "Both." A ghost of a smile crossed Rafe's face. "I'm very good at stubborn. Despite everything." Lila almost laughed. But that night, lying in her small room off the kitchen, she heard voices drifting through the walls. Rafe and Mateo, talking low in the main room. "You know this won't end well," Mateo said. "Vivian is not going to stop, and the town will side with her. They always do." "Then they side with her." Rafe's voice was hard. "I'm not throwing Lila out to satisfy gossip. It ain't about gossip, boss. It's about survival. You're already operating on thin margins. If Vivian's father decides to make trouble, cut off your credit, pressure the feed suppliers, turn the other ranchers against you, this place goes under." Silence. "I know," Rafe said finally, and Lila heard the exhaustion in his voice. "I know what's at stake, but I'm not abandoning someone who needs help just because it's inconvenient. I did that once. I won't do it again." Lila pressed her palm against the wall, throat tight. She didn't know what he meant by that last part, but she heard the weight of old guilt in his words. She also heard Mateo's resigned sigh. "Your funeral," Mateo said. "Just don't say I didn't warn you." Lila barely slept. When dawn came, she rose early and walked out to check on the horses. needing movement and fresh air to clear her head. The gray mare she had first treated, the one who had been dying that night, Lila stumbled into the barn, whickered softly when Lila approached. The horse was healthy now, coat gleaming, eyes bright. Lila had named her Shadow for her gray coloring. "Hey, girl," Lila murmured, stroking Shadow's neck. "You feeling good?" The mare nuzzled her shoulder, warm breath against Lila's skin. Lila had always felt more comfortable with animals than people. Animals didn't lie, didn't pretend. They either trusted you or they didn't, and you knew where you stood. People were harder, messier. They smiled while planning your destruction, like Garrett Shaw, like Vivian Langford. Lila. She turned to find Rafe standing in the barn doorway, backlit by the rising sun. "We need to talk," he said. Lila's heart sank. This was it. The conversation where he would explain, very reasonably, why she needed to leave, where he would offer some money, maybe a letter of reference, and send her on her way to protect his ranch. She couldn't even blame him, but Rafe's next words knocked that assumption sideways. "I'm taking you to town today. Introducing you properly, making it clear you work for me as a ranch hand, same as Mateo or Ren, and that anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly." Lila stared at him. "That's a terrible idea. It'll probably make everything worse." "Maybe." Rafe stepped into the barn, morning light cutting across his face. "But I'm tired of Vivian controlling the narrative. People want to gossip. Fine, but they're going to hear the truth first. That you saved my herd when nobody else could. That you work harder than any hand I've had. That you're here because you earned it, not because of anything improper. I know what you're going to say." He held up a hand. "That I'm risking the ranch, that it's not worth it. But here's the thing, Lila. This ranch was supposed to be about building something good. A place where hard work mattered more than gossip or status or who your father was. If I compromise that to keep Vivian happy, then what's the point? I might as well sell to her father and be done with it." Lila's chest felt too tight. Nobody had ever stood up for her like this. Not her aunt, not the people in town who had known her for years. "Why?" she whispered. "Why does it matter so much?" Rafe was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with something Lila couldn't quite name. "Because you remind me that some things are worth fighting for, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." He met her eyes. "And because if I let Vivian run you off, I'm no better than the people who abandoned you at that church." Lila felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back hard. "Okay," she said. "We'll go to town. Wear your Sunday best." A rare smile touched Rafe's mouth, or whatever passes for it around here. We're going to make an impression. Lila owned exactly 2 dresses, both borrowed from the trunk of Rafe's late wife's clothes. One was faded calico, practical and plain. The other was dark blue wool with a simple white collar, the kind a respectable woman might wear to church or a social call. She chose the blue dress, twisted her hair into the neatest braid she could manage, and scrubbed her hands until they looked almost presentable. When she emerged from her room, Rafe was waiting by the wagon, wearing clean clothes and an expression of grim determination. "You look nice," he said. "I look terrified." "That too." Rafe offered his hand to help her onto the wagon seat. "But you don't have to be. I'll handle the talking." They drove into town in tense silence. Lila watched the landscape roll past, autumn grass turning gold, distant mountains sharp against the blue sky, a hawk circling overhead. Beautiful country, harsh country, the kind of place that tested you constantly and didn't care if you passed or failed. The town itself was small, one main street lined with wooden buildings, a church at one end, a saloon at the other. People stopped to stare as Rafe's wagon rolled past. Lila felt their eyes like brands. Rafe pulled up in front of the general store and set the brake. "First stop," he said. "Then the feed supplier, then the bank. By the time we're done, everyone will know exactly who you are and why you're here. And if they don't believe you, then they don't." Rafe jumped down and came around to help her from the wagon. "But at least we'll have said our piece." The general store was owned by a thin, nervous man named Howard Beckett, who nearly dropped his ledger when Rafe walked in with Lila. "Mr. Donovan, I wasn't expecting. I heard you might be." Howard's eyes darted to Lila, then away. "What can I do for you?" "Need to place an order, Howard. Also wanted to introduce you to Lila Whitaker. She's working my ranch now. Saved my entire herd from poisoning last month." Howard's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. "Is that so?" "It is." Rafe's tone was pleasant, but carried an edge. "She's got a gift with animals. Best hand I've had in years. If she comes in here needing supplies, I want her treated with the same respect you'd show Mateo or any of my other workers." Of course, Howard was sweating now. "No disrespect intended, Mr. Donovan." "None taken yet." Rafe handed over a supply list. "I'll need this ready by Friday." They left Howard stammering and moved on to the feed supplier, where Rafe delivered the same speech. Then to the hardware store, the seamstress, the doctor's office. By noon, Lila's face hurt from holding a neutral expression while people stared and whispered. Their final stop was the bank. The First National Bank of Cedar Ridge was the nicest building in town, brick instead of wood, with actual glass windows and a sign painted in gold leaf. The banker, a portly man named Clarence Webb, greeted Rafe with professional warmth that cooled noticeably when Lila entered behind him. "Mr. Donovan, what brings you in today?" "Business, Clarence, and introductions." Rafe gestured to Lila. "This is Lila Whitaker, my new ranch foreman. She'll be handling some of the ranch accounts going forward." Clarence's expression went carefully blank. "I see. That's highly unusual." "Unusual, but necessary. Lila has a head for figures, and I trust her judgment." Rafe leaned against the counter, casual but with steel underneath. "Any reason that would be a problem?" "No, no problem at all." Clarence's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Though I should mention I had a visit from Miss Langford yesterday. She expressed some concern about the ranch's finances, suggested that perhaps you were being taken advantage of by certain unscrupulous individuals." Lila's hands clenched in her skirts. Rafe's expression didn't change. "Did she now?" "She was quite worried. Mentioned that vulnerable men are often targets for women of questionable character looking to secure their futures through deception." "That's interesting," Rafe said softly. "Since the only person who's ever tried to deceive me regarding my ranch was Vivian herself, when she tried to convince me last year that selling to her father was for my own good." Clarence flushed. "Mr. Donovan, I don't think so." "Here's what I think, Clarence. I think Vivian is spreading lies because she doesn't like that I'm running my ranch my way instead of hers. And I think you'd do well to remember that my business has kept this bank profitable through bad winters and droughts. So, unless you want me to take my accounts to the bank in Silverton, I suggest you treat my employees with respect." Silence filled the bank. The clerk at the back desk had stopped working to watch. Clarence cleared his throat. "Of course, Mr. Donovan. No disrespect intended to Miss Whitaker." "Good." Rafe straightened. "Lila, let's go. We're done here." Outside, Lila had to force herself to breathe normally. Her whole body shook with suppressed emotion, anger, humiliation, and something dangerously close to gratitude. "That was," she started. "Necessary," Rafe finished. "And not over. Vivian will push back harder now. Maybe I should—" "No." Rafe turned to face her, expression fierce. "Don't finish that sentence. You're not leaving. You're not backing down. We're in this together now, whether Vivian likes it or not." Lila wanted to argue, wanted to point out that she was dragging him into a fight he didn't need. But she was also tired of running, tired of letting other people's judgment define her. "All right," she said quietly. "Together." Rafe nodded once, satisfied. Then his expression shifted, looking past Lila toward something behind her. Lila turned to see Vivian Langford emerging from the dress shop across the street, accompanied by two women in expensive clothes. All three were staring directly at them. Vivian's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Rafe, what a pleasant surprise. She glided across the street, skirt swishing. And Miss Whitaker, how nice to see you in proper attire for once. Lila bit back her first response. Vivian. Rafe's voice was cold. Surprised you're still in town. Thought you'd have headed back east by now. Oh, I'm in no hurry. There's so much to do here. So many people to visit. Vivian's gaze flicked to Lila, then back to Rafe. I've been hearing the most interesting stories about your ranch, about how you've taken in a woman with no references, no family, no background anyone can verify. Some are calling it charitable. Others are calling it something else. Let them call it whatever they want, Rafe said flatly. But that's just it, darling. What people call things matters. Vivian stepped closer, lowering her voice to something that sounded almost concerned. I'm worried about you. This woman shows up out of nowhere, gains your trust, has access to your accounts. Don't you see how it looks? How vulnerable it makes you? The only thing I'm vulnerable to is losing my patience with this conversation. Vivian's mask slipped for just a second, revealing something cold and hard underneath. Then the smile returned. Very well. I can see you're determined to make mistakes. She turned to Lila. I do hope you understand what you're doing, Miss Whitaker. Small towns have long memories. Once your reputation is ruined, it stays ruined. And Rafe's right along with it. My reputation was already ruined, Lila said quietly. I've got nothing left to lose. Everyone has something to lose. Vivian's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The question is whether you're willing to drag others down with you. She swept away before Lila could respond, her companions following like well-dressed shadows. Rafe swore under his breath. Ignore her. She's just trying to get in your head. But Lila couldn't ignore it, because Vivian was right about one thing. Lila's presence was damaging Rafe's standing, and no matter how much he claimed not to care, eventually it would cost him something he couldn't afford to lose. They drove back to the ranch in silence. When they arrived, Mateo was waiting with more bad news. 3 of the steers are missing from the south pasture, he said. Tracks suggest rustlers. Rafe's expression went dark. How many riders? At least 2, maybe 3. They knew what they were doing, cut out the best stock, covered their trail. Same group that hit the Morrison Ranch last month. Likely. Mateo glanced at Lila, then back to Rafe. Could also be someone sending a message. The implication hung in the air. Vivian's father had connections to every criminal operation in the territory. If he wanted to pressure Rafe, stolen cattle would be an easy way to do it. Round up whoever's available, Rafe said. We ride at first light. I want those cattle back. Lila stepped forward. I'm coming with you. Like hell you are. This isn't fence mending. These men are armed and dangerous. I can ride. I can shoot. Lila met his eyes, and I won't sit here waiting while you risk your life for cattle I helped save. Rafe looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Lila's expression must have convinced him. Fine, he said finally, but you follow orders, no heroics. Understood. Mateo shook his head. This is a bad idea, boss. Yeah, Rafe agreed. But when has that ever stopped us? They rode out at dawn. Rafe, Lila, Mateo, and Ren. Levi and Cole stayed behind to watch the ranch. The trail was easy to follow at first, heading northeast toward the Badlands where the law rarely ventured. By midday, they had covered miles of rough country. The tracks led into a narrow canyon with steep walls and limited visibility. Ambush territory, Mateo muttered. Rafe pulled up, studying the canyon entrance. Could also be the only way through. We go around, we lose a day. Or we go through and lose more than that, Ren said. Lila felt the tension ratchet higher. This was the moment where smart people turned back, where caution won over stubbornness. But Rafe didn't turn back. Single file, he said, eyes open, rifles ready. They entered the canyon in silence, hoofbeats echoing off stone walls. Lila's heart hammered against her ribs. Her palms were slick on the rifle Rafe had insisted she carry. They were halfway through when the first shot rang out. The bullet hit the canyon wall 2 feet from Lila's head, spraying rock chips across her face. Her horse reared, nearly throwing her. She grabbed the saddle horn with one hand, rifle clutched in the other, heart slamming into her throat. Down! Rafe's voice cut through the chaos. Get behind the rocks! Lila didn't think. She threw herself from the saddle, hitting the ground hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. The rifle skittered from her grip. She scrambled forward on hands and knees while bullets sparked off stone around her. Mateo reached her first, hauling her behind a boulder with one hand while firing upward with the other. Stay low. Lila pressed her back against the rock, gasping. Her hand shook so badly she could barely hold the rifle. This was nothing like the careful target practice Rafe had insisted on. This was chaos and noise, and the sick certainty that she was about to die in a canyon miles from anywhere that mattered. How many? Rafe's voice came from somewhere to her left. 3, maybe 4, Ren answered. High ground, east wall. Another volley of shots. Lila forced herself to look around the boulder's edge. Movement on the canyon rim. Figures silhouetted against the sky. They had the advantage of position, and they were using it. We're pinned, Mateo said flatly. Can't go forward. Can't retreat without exposing ourselves. The horses are scattered. We lose them. We're dead out here. Lila's mind raced. The canyon walls were too steep to climb quickly. Going back meant a 1/4 mile of open ground, Forward was worse. They were trapped, and whoever was shooting knew it. "Stop firing," a voice called from above. Male, rough, with an accent Lila couldn't place. "We don't want trouble. Just throw down your weapons and ride out." "Like hell," Rafe muttered, then louder. "Those are my cattle you stole. I want them back." Laughter echoed off the canyon walls. "Cattle are long gone, friend. This ain't about beef anymore. This is about you learning to mind your business and stop making enemies." Lila's blood went cold. Mateo had been right. This wasn't random rustling. This was a message. "Who sent you?" Rafe shouted. "Was it Langford?" Silence. Then more gunfire. Closer this time. A bullet ricocheted off the rock inches from Lila's head. "Next one won't miss," the voice called. "You got one chance. Leave the woman and ride out. She's what this is about anyway." Lila felt the words like a physical blow. Mateo swore viciously. Ren turned to stare at her, eyes wide. Rafe's expression went murderous. "Over my dead body. That can be arranged." The next volley was concentrated and deliberate. Lila realized with sick certainty that they were trying to flush Rafe out, make him expose himself. If he died trying to protect her, Vivian got what she wanted without blood on her hands. "We need to move," Mateo said urgently. "Now, while they're reloading, back toward the entrance." "We'll never make it," Ren said. "Not all of us." Lila's mind clicked through options with the same strange clarity she felt when diagnosing sick animals. Sometimes you couldn't save everything. Sometimes you had to sacrifice one thing to save the rest. She looked at Rafe, at Mateo, at Ren. Good people. People who had given her a chance when nobody else would. People who were about to die because of her. "I'll draw them off," Lila said. The words came out steadier than she felt. "Give you time to get to the horses." "Absolutely not," Rafe snapped. "It's the only way. They want me, not you. I'll go out, hands up, unarmed. Once they're focused on me, you ride." "Lila, this is my fault." The words burst out of her, raw and desperate. "Vivian is doing this because of me. Those men are shooting because I didn't have the sense to leave when I should have. So let me fix it." Rafe grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. "Listen to me. You don't fix this by surrendering to men who will kill you the second we're gone. That's not courage. That's suicide." "Then what do you suggest?" Lila's voice cracked. "Because in about 2 minutes they're going to rush us, and we're all dead anyway." Mateo touched Rafe's shoulder. "Boss, she's got a point. They want her alive, at least long enough to make it look like an accident. That's more time than we've got otherwise." "No." Rafe's voice was flat. Final. "We find another way." But there was no other way, and they all knew it. The canyon walls were too steep. The shooters had the high ground. Their ammunition wouldn't last forever. Lila made her decision. Before anyone could stop her, she stood up, hands raised, rifle left behind the rock. "Don't shoot. I'm coming out. Lila, get down." Rafe lunged for her, but she was already moving, stepping into the open with her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The shooting stopped. Silence fell across the canyon, broken only by her boots crunching on loose stone. Lila walked forward slowly, arms raised, painfully aware of how exposed she was. One bullet. That's all it would take. "Smart girl," the voice called from above. "Keep walking. Your friends can leave now." Lila risked a glance back. Rafe stood frozen, rifle raised, face twisted with fury and something that looked like fear. "Go," she mouthed. "Please." She saw the moment he understood what she was doing. Saw the calculation flash across his face, save himself and his people, or die trying to save her. For a terrible second, she thought he'd choose death. Then, Mateo grabbed his arm, pulling him back toward the horses. "Boss, we have to move. Now!" Rafe didn't lower his rifle. "We're coming back for you," he said, voice carrying across the canyon. "You hear me, Lila? This isn't over." "I know," Lila whispered, though he was too far away to hear. She kept walking until rough hands grabbed her from behind. Someone yanked her arms down, binding her wrists with rope that bit into her skin. A cloth sack went over her head, cutting off her vision. "Good choice," a man's voice said close to her ear. "Saved your friends' lives. Not sure about your own, though." Lila's stomach lurched as they dragged her forward. She heard horses, the creak of leather, voices discussing something she couldn't quite make out. Then she was lifted and thrown across a saddle like a sack of grain. The horse started moving, and all Lila could do was hang on and pray that Rafe was smart enough not to follow them directly into whatever trap Vivian had prepared. They rode for what felt like hours. Lila lost track of time in the darkness of the hood, body aching from the awkward position, mind racing through increasingly worse scenarios. Finally, the horse stopped. She was dragged down and dumped on hard ground. The hood came off. Lila blinked in the sudden light. They were in some kind of abandoned building. A barn, maybe, or an old mining structure. Wooden walls, dirt floor, roof half collapsed to let in slashes of late afternoon sun. 3 men stood around her. The one who had done the talking was older, perhaps 40, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. The other 2 were younger, harder to read. "Here's how this works," Scarface said. "You're going to write a letter to Rafe Donovan. Tell him you're leaving, taking the money you stole from his ranch, heading east. Make it convincing." Lila's mind reeled. I didn't steal anything. Doesn't matter what's true. Matters what people believe. He tossed a pencil and paper at her feet. Write it, or we make things unpleasant. And if I do write it. Scarface smiled. It wasn't reassuring. Then you get to keep breathing for a while. Maybe. Lila's hands were still bound. She couldn't write, even if she wanted to. This is Vivian's plan, isn't it? Frame me for theft. Make me disappear. Clear the path back to Rafe. Don't know any Vivian, Scarface said, but his eyes shifted slightly. We're just doing a job that involves kidnapping and murder. Lila forced her voice steady. That's a hanging offense in this territory. Only if someone proves it. Scarface crouched down to her level. See, the thing is, nobody's going to look too hard for a woman like you. No family, no history, already branded a thief and a liar. You disappear. People shrug and move on. Probably figure you ran off with another man's money. The worst part was that he was right. Nobody would investigate. Nobody would care. She'd vanish. And within a month, people would forget she had existed. Except Rafe. Rafe would know. He'd come looking. And Vivian was probably counting on that too. Another accident waiting to happen. I need my hands free to write, Lila said quietly. Scarface considered this, then nodded to one of the younger men. Cut her loose, but if she tries anything, shoot her. The rope fell away. Lila's wrists were raw, bleeding in places. She picked up the pencil with numb fingers. What do you want me to say? Make it good. Apologetic. Say you never meant to hurt him, but you saw an opportunity and took it. That you're going back east to start over. Scarface smiled again. Make him believe you were playing him from the start. Lila stared at the paper. Her hand shook. If she wrote this letter, it would destroy everything. Her reputation, Rafe's trust, any chance of proving Vivian's involvement. But if she didn't write it, these men would kill her. She thought about her mother, about the strange gift she had passed down, the ability to sense wrongness, to feel sickness before it showed symptoms. Her mother had always said it was about paying attention to the small details everyone else missed. Lila looked at the three men. Scarface was confident, relaxed. The younger ones were nervous, fidgeting. The one who had cut her ropes kept glancing at the door. They were expecting someone, or worried someone would show up. Lila started writing. Not the letter they wanted, but something else entirely. She wrote quickly, keeping her body positioned to block their view. What's taking so long? Scarface demanded. I'm trying to make it convincing, Lila said. You want him to believe it, right? That takes time. She kept writing. Not a confession, a message. Something that would only make sense to someone who knew her. When she finished, she held out the paper. Scarface snatched it, eyes scanning the words, his expression darkened. "This isn't what I told you to write. It's what I'm willing to write," Lila said. "Take it or leave it." Scarface's hand went to the gun at his hip. Lila's heart stopped. Then a voice called from outside. "Someone's coming." "Riders." All three men turned toward the door. Lila didn't hesitate. She grabbed the pencil and drove it into Scarface's leg as hard as she could. He screamed, staggering backward. Lila was already moving, diving for the door. The younger men recovered faster than she expected, grabbing for her. She twisted away, barely avoiding their grip. Outside, the sound of hoofbeats grew louder. Lila ran toward it, legs burning, lungs screaming. A gunshot cracked behind her. She felt the bullet pass close enough to hear it, but she didn't stop. Then Rafe was there, riding hard with Mateo and Ren flanking him. He swung down before his horse even stopped, catching Lila as her legs gave out. "I've got you," he said roughly. "I've got you." Gunfire erupted behind them. Mateo and Ren returned fire, while Rafe hauled Lila onto his horse. They rode out in a chaos of bullets and shouting, Lila clinging to Rafe's back, too shaken to do anything but hold on. They didn't stop until they were miles clear, the building a distant speck behind them. Only then did Rafe pull up, turning to check her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Scared, but not hurt." Lila's whole body trembled. "How did you find me?" "Tracked them. Mateo's the best tracker in the territory." Rafe's hands were gentle but thorough, checking for wounds she might not feel yet. "What did they want?" "A letter saying I stole from you and ran off." Lila pulled the crumpled paper from where she had shoved it in her pocket. "I didn't write what they wanted. Wrote something else instead." Rafe unfolded the paper, reading. His expression shifted from confusion to understanding, to something that looked almost like awe. Lila had written, "The mare with the ash-colored coat is dying. Only one person can save her. The rest is lies." "You wrote a message I'd understand," Rafe said quietly. "Something that proved coercion. I thought if they killed me, at least you'd know the truth." Lila's voice cracked. "That I didn't betray you." Rafe's arms came around her, sudden and fierce. "You're not dying. Not today. Not on Vivian's orders or anyone else's." Lila pressed her face against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of leather and horse and dust. Safe. For now. When they finally pulled apart, Mateo was watching with an expression of grim satisfaction. "We got one of them," he said. "The one you stabbed with a pencil. He's going to talk." Lila's hands were still shaking. "He won't testify against Vivian. Her father will make sure of it. Maybe. But now we know she's willing to commit murder." Rafe's voice was hard. "That changes things." They rode back to the ranch in tense silence. Levi and Cole met them at the gate, rifles ready, relaxing only when they saw everyone accounted for. "Trouble?" Levi asked. "Always," Ren said wearily. "But we're still breathing." Lila slid off the horse, legs barely supporting her weight. Everything hurt. Her wrists raw, her ribs bruised from being thrown across the saddle, her hands bleeding from the ropes. But she was alive. Rafe sent the others to tend the horses while he walked Lila to the house. Inside, he poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. "Drink. You've earned it." Lila drank. The whiskey burned going down, but it helped steady her nerves. Vivian is not going to stop. I know. She'll try again. Different method, same goal. Lila set down the glass. "I should leave tonight before someone else gets hurt." "No." Rafe's voice was flat. "We're past that now. Rafe, those men tried to kill you today. They would have succeeded if we'd been 10 minutes slower. If Mateo hadn't picked up their trail." His jaw tightened. "Vivian declared war when she did that, and I'm done playing defense." Lila stared at him. "What are you going to do?" "Fight back." Rafe drained his glass in one swallow. "Vivian thinks she can manipulate this situation because I'm too weak or too honorable to hit back. Time to prove her wrong." "You're talking about going after her father's business interests." "I'm talking about exposing what she did. Those men didn't just appear out of nowhere. Someone hired them. Someone paid them. That money leaves a trail." Rafe's eyes were hard, "and I'm going to follow it straight back to Vivian Langford." Lila wanted to argue, wanted to point out that going after someone with Vivian's resources was suicide. But she was also tired of being hunted, tired of running. "What do you need me to do?" she asked instead. Rafe looked at her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Get some rest tonight. Tomorrow we ride into town and file charges against those men for attempted murder and kidnapping. Force the law to investigate. Make noise. Get people asking questions Vivian can't afford to have answered. The sheriff is on her father's payroll, maybe, but the federal marshal isn't." Rafe smiled grimly. "An attempted murder on federal land is a federal crime. Sheriff can't bury it, even if he wants to." Lila felt a flicker of hope. "You think it'll work? I think it's our best shot. And I'm done sitting around waiting for Vivian to make the next move." That night, Lila couldn't sleep. She lay in her small room, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events. The ambush, the kidnapping, the moment she thought she was going to die, and the moment Rafe had appeared, riding hard, refusing to leave her behind. A soft knock on her door brought her upright. "Yeah." The door opened. Rafe stood in the doorway, still fully dressed. "Couldn't sleep either?" "No." He hesitated, then stepped inside, leaving the door open for propriety's sake. "I wanted to say something about today." Lila sat up fully, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "Okay, what you did in that canyon, stepping out to draw their fire, that was the bravest and stupidest thing I've ever seen." Rafe's voice was rough. "Don't ever do it again. I was trying to save your life, and I was trying to save yours." He moved closer, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Lila, if I'd lost you today, if those men had killed you while I rode away to save my own skin, I wouldn't have been able to live with that." Lila's throat tightened. "Why not? You barely know me." "That's the thing. I thought I barely knew you." Rafe's eyes met hers. "But somewhere over the past few weeks, you became important. Not just as a hand who saved my herd. As a person. Someone I trust. Someone I—" He trailed off, jaw working. Lila's heart hammered. "Someone you what?" "Someone I can't afford to lose." Rafe finished quietly. The ranch was supposed to be enough. Work and land and building something lasting. After Lena died, I told myself that's all I needed. But then you showed up in a ruined wedding dress, half dead and completely lost. And you reminded me that there's more to life than just surviving. Lila couldn't breathe. "Rafe, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "You've been through hell. The last thing you need is me complicating things further. I just needed you to know that you matter to me, to this ranch, to everyone here, and we're going to fight for you the way you've been fighting for us." Tears pricked Lila's eyes. She blinked them back hard. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just promise me you won't throw yourself in front of any more bullets." "I promise to try." Lila managed a shaky smile. "Can't guarantee success." Rafe almost laughed. "Fair enough." He stood, moving toward the door. "Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be hard." "Rafe." Lila's voice stopped him. "Thank you for coming after me. Always," he said simply. Then he was gone, leaving Lila alone with her racing thoughts and the warmth spreading through her chest. The next morning, they rode into town. All of them, Rafe, Lila, Mateo, Ren, even Levi and Cole. A show of force. The sheriff's office was a small wooden building next to the jail. Sheriff Porter looked up from his desk when they walked in, his expression going from surprise to weariness in an instant. "Mr. Donovan, what brings you in with an army?" "Attempted murder," Rafe said flatly. "Yesterday, 4 men ambushed us in Canyon Pass. They shot at us, kidnapped Miss Whitaker, and threatened to kill her unless she signed a false confession." Porter's face remained carefully neutral. "That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime." Rafe dropped the crumpled letter on Porter's desk. "There's the proof. They wanted her to write a confession of theft. When she wrote something else instead, they tried to kill her." Porter picked up the letter, reading slowly. This doesn't prove anything except that someone wrote something unclear. There's also the man we captured, Mateo said. He's being held at the ranch, ready to testify. Under duress, I imagine. Porter set down the letter. Look, Mr. Donovan, I understand you're upset, but without clear evidence of who hired these men or what their intentions were, there's not much I can do. Then I'll take it to the federal marshal, Rafe said. Attempted murder on federal land is his jurisdiction anyway. Porter's expression hardened. Now there's no need to escalate. The door burst open. Vivian Langford swept in, followed by a well-dressed man Lila didn't recognize. Sheriff Porter. I'm so glad you're here, Vivian said breathlessly. I need to report a theft. This woman, she pointed at Lila, stole money from my reticule yesterday while I was shopping. $300. Lila's stomach dropped. Rafe's hand went to his gun. That's a lie, is it? The man with Vivian stepped forward. I'm Thomas Blackwood, Miss Langford's attorney. I have 3 witnesses who saw Miss Whitaker near my client's carriage yesterday afternoon. Shortly after, the money was discovered missing. I wasn't anywhere near her carriage, Lila said, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. Vivian's expression was sympathetic, poisonously so. I understand times are hard, dear, and you've been through so much, but stealing is a crime. Sheriff, I want her arrested. Porter looked uncomfortable. Miss Langford, perhaps we should arrest her, Vivian repeated firmly. Unless Mr. Donovan would like to make restitution on her behalf, I'm willing to drop charges if the money is returned. The trap snapped shut. Lila saw it clearly now. If Rafe paid, it looked like an admission of guilt. If he didn't, Lila went to jail on false charges. Either way, Vivian won. This is ridiculous, Wren snapped. Lila was at the ranch all day yesterday. We can prove it. Can you? Blackwood smiled. Because I have sworn statements from 3 upstanding citizens who say otherwise, unless you're suggesting they're all lying. I'm suggesting someone paid them to lie, Rafe said. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Donovan. One you'll need proof for. Blackwood pulled out a document. Sheriff Porter, this is a formal complaint. I trust you'll do your duty. Porter's hand went to the handcuffs on his belt. Miss Whitaker, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. No. Rafe stepped between Lila and the sheriff. You arrest her, you'll have to go through me first. Rafe, don't, Lila said quietly. It's okay. It's not okay. This is a setup, and everyone knows it. Then we'll prove it in court. Lila touched his arm. Let me do this. Fighting the sheriff won't help. She could see Rafe struggling with the decision. Saw the moment he realized she was right. Resisting arrest would only make things worse. He stepped aside, but his eyes stayed on Vivian. This isn't over. No, Vivian agreed softly. It isn't. Porter cuffed Lila's wrists, the metal cold against her skin. She had been bound twice in 2 days now. It was starting to feel like a permanent condition. As Porter led her toward the jail cells, Lila looked back once. Rafe stood frozen, hands clenched into fists, face twisted with fury and helplessness. Lila tried to give him a reassuring smile. Wasn't sure she succeeded. The cell door clanged shut with a finality that made her chest constrict. Through the barred window, she could see Vivian and her lawyer leaving, both looking satisfied. Lila sank onto the thin cot and let herself shake. She had survived Garrett Shaw abandoning her, survived the town's judgment, survived poisoned cattle and ambushes and kidnapping. But sitting in this cell, knowing Vivian was systematically destroying every chance she had at a future, Lila felt something inside her crack. Maybe the frontier had finally broken her after all. Then she remembered Rafe's voice in the canyon. "We're coming back for you." And Mateo's words, "She's what this is about, anyway." And her own hands driving a pencil into a man's leg without hesitation. No, she wasn't broken. Just bent, and bent things could still fight back. Lila stood up, walked to the cell door, and started planning. The jail cell smelled like rust and old sweat. Lila counted the cracks in the ceiling. 17 major ones. Dozens of smaller splits branching off like veins. She had been counting them for hours, trying to keep her mind occupied with something other than the reality of her situation. She was locked up on false charges. Vivian's witnesses would lie under oath. The sheriff was either bought or too scared of the Langford family to care about the truth. And somewhere outside these walls, Rafe was probably doing something reckless that would only make everything worse. Footsteps in the hallway made her sit up. Sheriff Porter appeared, looking uncomfortable. Behind him stood a woman Lila didn't recognize, late 30s, dressed in severe gray, carrying a leather satchel. "You have a visitor," Porter said. "Legal counsel." The woman stepped into view. "Margaret Reed. I'm an attorney from Silverton. Mr. Donovan retained my services this morning." Lila blinked. "Rafe hired you." "He did. Rode 20 miles before dawn to reach my office." Margaret's voice was crisp, professional. "May I speak with my client privately, Sheriff?" Porter hesitated, then nodded. 10 minutes. I'll be right outside." When the door closed, Margaret pulled a stool close to the cell bars and sat. "Let's be efficient. Tell me exactly what happened, leaving nothing out." Lila did. The ambush, the kidnapping, the forced letter, Vivian's accusation in the sheriff's office. Margaret took notes in a small leather book, her expression unreadable. "The witnesses Vivian produced," Margaret said when Lila finished. "Do you know who they are?" "No, I've never seen them before yesterday." "That's actually good. Makes it easier to prove fabrication." Margaret tapped her pencil against the notebook. Here's our situation. The theft charge is weak. 3 witnesses claiming they saw you near a carriage isn't proof you took anything, but it's enough to hold you for arraignment. That's scheduled for tomorrow morning. Lila's stomach sank. What happens then? Judge Carver will hear the charges. He's not on the Langford payroll, but he's conservative and doesn't like disruption. If Vivian's lawyer presents a compelling case, he might bind you over for trial. That means weeks in this cell waiting for a circuit judge. Weeks, possibly months. Margaret's expression softened slightly. I won't lie to you, Miss Whitaker. This is a dangerous situation. Vivian Langford has resources and connections. She's playing a long game. What's the short game? Lila asked. Because I don't have months. Margaret studied her for a moment. The short game is forcing her hand, making her reveal herself before she can build an airtight case. But that's risky. Everything's risky at this point. True. Margaret stood, gathering her things. Mr. Donovan said you're tougher than you look. I hope he's right, because tomorrow is going to test that. After she left, Lila lay back on the thin cot and stared at the ceiling cracks again. Somewhere outside, the sun was setting. She could see a slice of orange sky through the high window. She thought about the ranch, about Shadow, the gray mare, who had been the first animal she had saved, about Mateo's quiet respect and Wren's grudging acceptance, about Rafe's hands, rough and gentle at the same time, checking her for injuries after the kidnapping, about the way he had said, "Someone I can't afford to lose." Lila closed her eyes. She had survived this. She had to. The night dragged. Lila dozed fitfully, waking at every sound. Once she heard shouting outside, male voices, angry. She couldn't make out words, but she recognized Rafe's tone. He was out there fighting for her, while she sat locked in a cage. Morning came gray and cold. Porter brought weak coffee and hardtack that tasted like sawdust. Lila forced herself to eat anyway. She would need her strength. At 9 o'clock, Porter unlocked the cell. Arraignment in 30 minutes. You'll be cuffed for transport. Is that necessary? The courthouse is across the street. Regulations. His voice was apologetic but firm. Sorry, Miss Whitaker. The handcuffs felt familiar now. Lila walked out of the jail with her head up, refusing to show weakness. A small crowd had gathered outside the courthouse. Curious townspeople, probably hoping for entertainment. Lila spotted Rafe immediately. He stood near the courthouse steps with Mateo and Wren flanking him like bodyguards. When he saw her, something fierce and protective flashed across his face. Vivian was there too, of course. She stood with her lawyer and 3 well-dressed strangers who had to be the lying witnesses. Vivian's expression was serene, almost sympathetic. It made Lila want to spit. The courthouse was a single room with benches, a raised platform for the judge, and windows that let in weak morning light. Judge Carver was already seated, an older man with iron-gray hair and the weathered look of someone who had spent years riding circuit through hard country. "All rise for the arraignment of Lila Whitaker," the bailiff called. Lila stood beside Margaret Reed. Her legs shook, but she locked her knees and kept her face neutral. Judge Carver reviewed the documents in front of him. "Miss Whitaker, you're charged with theft of $300 from Miss Vivian Langford. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor." Lila's voice came out steady. "Your Honor." Thomas Blackwood stood smoothly. "The prosecution has 3 witnesses who place Miss Whitaker at the scene of the theft. We also have evidence that she's been living beyond her means, wearing clothes and using resources inconsistent with her station. This suggests both motive and opportunity." Margaret stood. "Those resources are wages earned through legitimate employment at the Donovan Ranch. As for the witnesses, we question their credibility and intend to prove they were paid to provide false testimony." "That's a serious accusation, Miss Reed," Carver said. "It's a serious case, Your Honor. My client has been the target of a sustained campaign of harassment by Miss Langford, including a kidnapping attempt just days ago." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Vivian's expression didn't change, but Blackwood stood quickly. "Your Honor, these wild claims are clearly an attempt to deflect from the actual crime. Miss Langford is the victim here, not the defendant." "Perhaps both are victims," Margaret said, "of a system that allows wealth and influence to manipulate justice." Carver's eyes narrowed. "Miss Reed, I won't have my courtroom turned into a political forum. Stick to the facts." "The facts are these, Your Honor. Miss Whitaker was at the Donovan Ranch the entire day of the alleged theft. We have 4 witnesses who can corroborate this: Mr. Donovan, Mateo Reyes, Ren Blackwood, and Levi Parker, all respected members of this community." "Respected by whom?" Blackwood interjected. "Mr. Donovan is known to have poor judgment when it comes to hiring. Mateo Reyes is Mexican. Ren Blackwood is an unmarried woman doing men's work, and Levi Parker is barely out of boyhood. These are hardly credible character witnesses." Lila felt rage burn through her chest. She started to speak, but Margaret's hand on her arm stopped her. "Your Honor," Margaret said calmly, "Mr. Blackwood just revealed his case has nothing to do with evidence and everything to do with prejudice. He's not interested in more justice. He's interested in destroying a young woman whose only crime was refusing to be intimidated by someone with more money and power." The courtroom erupted, people shouting, the bailiff calling for order. Carver slammed his gavel repeatedly. "Silence! I will have order, or I'll clear this courtroom." The noise died down. Carver looked between Margaret and Blackwood, clearly irritated with both. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "I'm setting a preliminary hearing for a few days from now. Both sides will present witnesses and evidence. Until then, Miss Whitaker will remain in custody." "Your Honor, my client poses no flight risk," Margaret protested. "She has steady employment and strong ties to the community. She also has no family, no property, and every reason to run," Blackwood countered. "The bail should be set high to ensure her appearance." Carver considered. "Bail is set at $500. Lila's heart sank. $500 might as well be 5,000. She didn't have it. Rafe didn't have it either. Not in liquid cash. "Your Honor, that's excessive for a first time. My decision is final, Miss Reed." Carver gathered his papers. "A few days. Come prepared to prove your claims. Court is adjourned." Porter took Lila's arm, guiding her back toward the jail. She caught Rafe's eye as she passed. He looked like he wanted to tear the courthouse apart with his bare hands. Outside, away from the crowd, Porter spoke quietly. "For what it's worth, I think this whole thing stinks, but I've got a family to feed. Can't afford to make enemies." Lila understood. Fear was easier than courage. "I know." Back in the cell, Lila paced. A few days until the hearing. A few days for Vivian to shore up her false witnesses. Maybe produce more evidence Lila couldn't refute. A few days of sitting helpless while her fate was decided by people who had already made up their minds. Footsteps again. This time it was Margaret Reed, looking grim. "I spoke with your employer," she said without preamble. "He's trying to raise bail money, but it's difficult. Most of his capital is tied up in land and livestock. The bank won't extend credit against the ranch. I didn't expect him to pay it anyway. He's determined. Mateo and Wren are asking around town, seeing if anyone will contribute." Margaret's expression said she didn't think that would work. "In the meantime, I need you to help me build our defense. Tell me everything you know about Vivian Langford. Everything." Lila spent the next hour recounting Vivian's visits to the ranch, her veiled threats, the way she had turned the town against Lila with careful gossip. Margaret took notes, asking sharp questions. "The kidnapping is our strongest card," Margaret said finally. "If we can prove Vivian hired those men, it undermines everything, makes her look like the aggressor. She'll deny it. Her father will make sure there's no connection. Probably. But I've been doing this a long time, Miss Whitaker. Rich people get sloppy when they think they're untouchable. Somewhere there's a trail, money changing hands, a witness who knows too much, a detail that doesn't line up." Margaret stood. "I'm going to dig. You sit tight." Easier said than done. Lila sat tight for another day and night, watching the light move across the floor. listening to the town sounds outside. Twice she heard Rafe's voice arguing with Porter. The second time, Porter threatened to arrest him for disturbing the peace. On the second morning, Wren appeared at the cell bars. Porter had allowed her inside, probably because he felt guilty. "Brought you something better than Porter's slop." Wren handed through a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside was real food, bread, cheese, dried beef. "How you holding up? I've been worse." Lila wasn't sure that was true, but it sounded better than admitting she was terrified. "How's the ranch?" "Fine. Levi and Cole are handling things. Rafe's losing his mind, though. Barely sleeps. Spent all yesterday riding to every ranch within miles, trying to borrow bail money." Wren's expression was hard to read. "He really cares about you." Lila's throat tightened. "I know. Do you?" Wren leaned against the bars. "Because from where I'm standing, you're still expecting to lose, still planning your exit." "I'm being realistic. You're being scared." Wren's voice wasn't unkind. "Look, when I first met you, I thought you were dead weight, some city girl playing farm dress-up. But you proved me wrong. You worked harder than men, twice your size. You saved animals everyone else gave up on. You stabbed a kidnapper with a damn pencil." Wren smiled slightly. "You're tougher than you think, Lila. Stop acting like you're already beaten." Before Lila could respond, shouting erupted outside. Male voices, angry and getting louder. Wren straightened. "That's Rafe." They heard the front door bang open. Heavy footsteps, then Rafe's voice loud enough to carry through the walls. "I want to see her now, Mr. Donovan. Visiting hours." "I don't care about visiting hours. Either let me see her, or arrest me too." Porter's resigned sigh was audible, even from the cell. 5 minutes. That's all you get." Rafe appeared, looking like he had been dragged through hell backward. His clothes were dusty, his face unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. But when he saw Lila, relief flooded his expression. "You okay?" "I'm fine. You look terrible." "Thanks." He gripped the bars, knuckles white. "Listen, I don't have much time. Margaret found something. One of Vivian's witnesses, a man named Robert Grimes, has a gambling debt at the saloon. Big one. It got paid off the same day he agreed to testify against you." Lila's pulse quickened. "Can she prove Vivian paid it?" "Working on it. The saloon owner keeps records. If we can show Grimes got money from the Langford accounts, it proves witness tampering. Vivian is too smart to use her own accounts." "Maybe, but her father's business manager isn't as careful. Margaret's pulling bank records now." Rafe's expression was fierce. "We're going to beat this, Lila. I promise." Lila wanted to believe him, but she had been disappointed too many times. "What if we can't? What if the judge doesn't care about the evidence? Then I break you out and we run." Rafe said it like he meant it. Mexico, Canada, somewhere they can't touch us. I don't care. I'm not letting you rot in jail for a crime you didn't commit. You'd lose everything. The ranch, your reputation. I don't care. His voice cracked. Lena's gone. The ranch is just land and buildings. But you're here. You're real. And I'm not losing someone else. He stopped, jaw working. Lila's heart hammered. Someone you what? Rafe looked at her, and Lila saw everything he wasn't saying written across his face. Fear and hope and something raw that made her chest ache. Time's up, Donovan, Porter said from the doorway. Rafe didn't move. 3 more minutes, or I call the bailiff. Rafe swore viciously but stepped back from the bars. A few days. That's all we need. A few days, and this is over. Lila nodded, not trusting her voice. After he left, Wren gave Lila a knowing look. Still think you're going to lose? Lila didn't answer. The day of the hearing arrived like a storm on the horizon, inevitable and dangerous. Lila woke before dawn, unable to sleep. Porter brought breakfast, but she couldn't eat. Margaret arrived early, looking energized. We got him. Grimes. He cracked last night after Margaret confronted him with the payment records. He admitted Vivian's father's business manager paid him $200 to claim he saw you near the carriage. Lila's hands shook. Will he testify to that? He already did. Gave a sworn statement to the federal marshal this morning. Margaret's smile was sharp. Vivian doesn't know yet. We're saving it for the hearing. The courtroom was packed when they arrived. It seemed like half the territory had shown up to watch. Lila saw Rafe in the front row with Mateo, Wren, Levi, and Cole. Their presence steadied her. Vivian sat across the aisle, looking immaculate in emerald silk, completely composed. Like this was just another social event. Judge Carver entered, and everyone stood. When they sat again, the room crackled with tension. This is a preliminary hearing in the matter of the territory versus Lila Whitaker, Carver said. Mr. Blackwood, present your case. Blackwood stood smoothly. Your Honor, the prosecution will show that the defendant, a woman of no fixed address and questionable character, stole $300 from Miss Vivian Langford on the afternoon in question. We have 3 witnesses who place her at the scene. He called his first witness, a woman named Sarah Pritchard, who claimed she saw Lila near Vivian's carriage. Her testimony was smooth, practiced, too practiced. Margaret stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Pritchard, how much did the Langford family pay you to lie today? The courtroom erupted. Blackwood shot to his feet. Objection! Counsel is making baseless accusations. I can prove it's not baseless, Your Honor, Margaret said calmly. She held up a document. This is a bank statement showing a deposit of $150 into Mrs. Pritchard's account the day after she agreed to testify. The money came from Langford Family Holdings. Pritchard's face went white. That was for lying under oath. Margaret's voice was cold. That's perjury, Mrs. Pritchard. A felony. Carver slammed his gavel. Order! Mrs. Pritchard, you will answer the question. But Pritchard was already standing, gathering her skirts. I need to leave. I'm not feeling well. Sit down, Carver ordered. Bailiff, make sure she doesn't leave this courtroom. Blackwood tried to recover. Your Honor, even if one witness is compromised, we have 2 others. Actually, you don't, Margaret called out. The prosecution may call Robert Grimes. Grimes entered, looking sick. He took the stand with shaking hands. Mr. Grimes, Margaret said, did you witness Miss Whitaker committing any theft? No, ma'am. Did someone pay you to say you did? Grimes swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Warren, who manages the Langford accounts. He gave me $200 to testify. I said I saw Miss Whitaker near the carriage. The courtroom exploded. Lila heard Vivian's sharp intake of breath, saw her exchange a panicked look with Blackwood. Carver's gavel slammed repeatedly. Order! I will have order! When the noise died down, Margaret continued. Mr. Grimes, did anyone else know about this arrangement? I don't know, ma'am. Warren said it was important business, that Miss Langford needed help dealing with a dangerous woman. Grimes looked at Lila, then away. I needed the money. I'm sorry. Margaret turned to Carver. Your Honor, the prosecution's case is built entirely on purchase testimony. Every witness was paid by the Langford family to lie. This is witness tampering, conspiracy to commit perjury, and malicious prosecution. I move for immediate dismissal of all charges. Blackwood stood, face red. Your Honor, these allegations against my client are inflammatory and backed by bank records and sworn testimony, Margaret interrupted. Would you like to add obstruction of justice to Miss Langford's charges? Vivian stood, finally losing her composure. This is absurd. That woman is a criminal and a liar. She seduced Rafe Donovan and wormed her way into his life for money. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows what you told them, Margaret said, but the evidence shows you fabricated a crime to destroy an innocent woman. The question is why? Because she doesn't belong here. Vivian's voice rose, sharp and desperate. She's nothing. Nobody. A runaway bride who got exactly what she deserved. Rafe should have thrown her out the day she showed up. But instead She stopped, realizing what she had revealed. The courtroom had gone silent. Judge Carver leaned forward. Miss Langford, are you admitting this prosecution was personal rather than criminal in nature? Vivian's lawyer grabbed her arm, whispering urgently. She shook him off. personal. Yes, it's personal. I've watched that woman take everything that should have been mine. Rafe was supposed to marry me. This ranch was supposed to be ours. But he chose a Mexican farm girl instead. And when she died, I thought. Vivian's voice cracked. I waited. I came back, and he replaced Lena with some broken thing he found in a barn. Lila felt the words like slaps, but she kept her face neutral. Gave Vivian nothing. Rafe stood. Your Honor, I'd like to address the court. Sit down, Mr. Donovan, Carver said, but without heat. With respect, Your Honor, I won't. Rafe moved into the center aisle. Miss Langford is right about one thing. I did choose Lena over her, and I'd make that choice 1,000 more times. Because Lena was honest and brave, and everything Vivian will never be. Vivian's face twisted. And you're right that Lila Whitaker showed up at my ranch with nothing. Rafe continued. She was broken and scared and had every reason to give up. But she didn't. She saved my animals when nobody else could. She worked harder than any hand I've hired. She risked her life to protect people she barely knew. That's not weakness, Vivian. That's strength you'll never understand. How touching, Vivian spat. The rough frontiersman defending his pet charity case. She's not a charity case. Rafe's voice was quiet, but carried through the courtroom. She's the woman I love, and I'm not letting you destroy her to satisfy your ego. The courtroom erupted again. Lila couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Did Rafe just? In front of everyone, Carver's gavel slammed. Enough. All of you sit down and be quiet. Slowly, order returned. Carver looked exhausted. Based on the evidence presented, he said heavily, I'm dismissing all charges against Lila Whitaker. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the federal marshal for investigation of witness tampering, perjury, and conspiracy. He looked at Vivian. Miss Langford, Mr. Blackwood, you're both ordered to remain in the territory pending that investigation. Vivian's face went ashen. Blackwood started to protest, but Carver cut him off. This hearing is concluded. Miss Whitaker, you're free to go. Porter unlocked Lila's handcuffs. The metal fell away, and for a moment, she just stood there, stunned. Free. She was free. The courtroom dissolved into chaos. People talking, arguing, demanding explanations. Lila pushed through the crowd, not looking at anyone, just needing air. Outside, she leaned against the courthouse wall and gulped down deep breaths. The autumn sun was warm on her face. She could hear birds singing. She was free. Lila. She turned. Rafe stood a few feet away, looking uncertain, like he wasn't sure she wanted him near her. You told the whole town you love me, Lila said. Her voice shook. I did. That's going to cause problems. More gossip. Make things harder. I know. Vivian's father will come after you now. After the ranch. He won't let this go. Probably not. Rafe stepped closer. But I meant what I said. Every word. Lila's eyes burned. I don't know if I can love you back. I don't know if I'm capable of that anymore. Garrett broke something in me. Garrett was a coward who didn't deserve you, Rafe said, and I'm not asking you to love me. I'm just asking you to stay. Let me prove that not every man is a liar. Let me show you what you're worth. Lila wanted to say yes, wanted to fall into his arms and believe everything would be fine. But she had believed before, and it had destroyed her. I need time, she whispered, to figure out who I am when I'm not running or fighting or surviving. Take all the time you need. Rafe's voice was rough. I'll be there at the ranch waiting. Mateo appeared, clearing his throat. Boss, we should go. Vivian's making threats about her father's lawyers. Rafe nodded, but didn't move. His eyes stayed on Lila. Come home when you're ready, he said quietly. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Lila standing alone in the afternoon sun. She watched him go, this man who had risked everything to save her, this man who told a courtroom full of people he loved her without hesitation. This man who terrified her because she was starting to believe him. Margaret Reed appeared at her elbow. You did well in there. I barely said anything. Exactly. You let the evidence speak. Margaret handed her a card. If Vivian's father tries anything, call me. I'm not done with this case yet. After Margaret left, Lila walked through town. People stared, but nobody spoke to her. The whispers followed her like shadows. She ended up at the general store. Howard Beckett looked up nervously when she entered. Miss Whitaker, I heard about the trial. Congratulations. Lila nodded. I need supplies, trail rations for a few days, and a map of the territory. Howard's eyes widened. You leaving? Maybe. Haven't decided yet. She paid with the small wages Rafe had given her before the arrest, and walked out carrying the supplies. The map crinkled in her pocket, a promise of escape. She could leave right now. Just walk away from this town, this ranch, this complicated man who had upended everything she thought she knew about trust. But as she stood on the town's main street, watching the sun sink toward the mountains, Lila thought about Shadow waiting in her stall, about Mateo's quiet respect and Wren's grudging friendship, about fence lines needing repair and cattle that would get sick again without someone who understood them, about Rafe's voice saying, "The woman I love," like it was simple truth instead of terrifying complexity. Lila looked at the road leading out of town. Then she looked at the road leading back to the ranch. She stood there for a long time, trying to decide which direction would hurt less. Finally, she started walking. Leela walked toward the ranch, not away from it. She hadn't consciously decided. Her feet just carried her in that direction, while her mind churned through fear and possibility. The sun dropped lower, painting the hills in shades of copper and gold, and she kept walking. By the time the ranch came into view, full dark was settling. Lamplight glowed in the main house windows. Lila could see figures moving inside, probably Rafe and the hands eating dinner, talking about the day. Normal things, like her world hadn't just been shaken apart and reassembled into an unfamiliar shape. She stopped at the barn instead of going to the house, needed a moment before facing anyone. Inside, the familiar smell of hay and horses wrapped around her like a blanket. Shadow whickered softly from her stall. Lila walked over, resting her forehead against the mare's warm neck. "Hey, girl, miss me?" The horse nuzzled her shoulder, and Lila felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. Animals didn't lie, didn't manipulate. They either trusted you or they didn't, and Shadow trusted her. "Thought you might have left." Leela turned. Mateo stood in the barn doorway, silhouetted against the last light. "I thought about it," Lila admitted. "But you came back." "I came back." Lila stroked Shadow's neck, not looking at him. "I don't know if that was smart." Mateo walked closer, leaning against the stall. "Smart's overrated. I did the smart thing once. Stayed quiet when my father got cheated out of wages by a mine owner. Didn't make trouble. Kept my head down." His voice went hard. "He died broke and broken while the mine owner got rich. Smart didn't help him. Didn't help anyone." Lila met his eyes. What would have helped? Fighting, making noise, refusing to let powerful people get away with destroying the powerless. Mateo's expression softened. "You fought, Lila. You could have confessed to something you didn't do, made it easier on everyone, but you didn't. That took guts. It took desperation. That's different." Mateo shook his head. "Desperate people give up all the time. You didn't. That's the difference." Before Lila could respond, the barn door opened again. Rafe stood there, and even in the dim light, Lila could see the tension in his shoulders. "I'll check the south fence," Mateo said, giving Lila a meaningful look before disappearing into the night. Rafe walked toward her slowly, like approaching a spooked horse. "Wasn't sure you'd come back." "Wasn't sure I would either." They stood in awkward silence. Lila searched for words and came up empty. Everything felt too big, too complicated to fit into language. "I shouldn't have said what I said in court." Rafe finally spoke. "Not like that. Not publicly. You deserved better than having your business announced to the whole territory." "You meant it, though. What you said. Every word." His voice was rough. "But that doesn't make it right. putting that on you when you've got enough to deal with." Lila turned back to Shadow, fingers working through the mare's mane. "Garrett told me he loved me the day before the wedding, said it looking right in my eyes, and I believed him completely. Then he disappeared with everything I had." Rafe didn't interrupt. "So when you say it," Lila continued, voice shaking, "all I can think is, how do I know? How do I know you're not just another man who wants something from me? Who'll take what he needs and leave me with nothing?" "You don't know," Rafe said simply. "That's the thing about trust. There's no guarantee, no proof. You just have to decide if someone's earned the chance to prove themselves." Lila laughed bitterly. "That's asking a lot." "Yeah, it is." Rafe moved closer, stopping just outside her space. "But for what it's worth, I'm not asking you to trust me because I said some words in a courtroom. I'm asking you to look at what I've done. I hired you when nobody else would. I stood up to Vivian and her father when it would have been easier to cut you loose. I rode into an ambush to get you back. I risked my ranch, my reputation, everything I've built. Maybe you're just stubborn." "Definitely stubborn," Rafe agreed, "but also honest. I don't know how to be anything else, Lila. Lena used to say it was my best and worst quality. I'm too direct for polite society, too rigid for politics. But I don't lie. Ever. So when I tell you I love you, that's not manipulation. That's just truth." Lila's eyes burned. She blinked hard, refusing to cry. "I don't know if I can love you back. I don't know if I remember how." "Then don't. Not yet. Maybe not ever." Rafe's voice was steady. "Just stay. Work the ranch. Save animals. Give yourself time to heal. And if you ever decide you want more, I'll be here. If you don't, I'll still be here, just in a different way." Lila finally turned to look at him directly. "Why? Why would you settle for that?" "Because having you here, even just as a friend and a hand, is better than not having you at all." Rafe's expression was open, vulnerable in a way she had never seen. "I've been alone for years, Lila. I'm good at alone, but I don't want to be anymore. So whatever you're willing to give, I'll take it." The words hit something deep in Lila's chest. She had spent so long expecting rejection, preparing for abandonment, that someone actively choosing to stay felt almost incomprehensible. "I'm not easy to be around," she whispered. "I'm angry a lot, scared. I wake up at night thinking about Garrett and Vivian and all the ways people have hurt me. It might never get better." "Might not," Rafe agreed, "but it also might. Either way, you don't have to deal with it alone." Lila looked at this man who had found her in his barn, wearing a ruined wedding dress and somehow decided she was worth fighting for. Who had stood in a courtroom and declared his love in front of people who would mock him for it? Who was offering her time and space and patience without demanding anything in return? She thought about what Matteo had said about fighting instead of staying quiet, about refusing to let powerful people destroy the powerless. She had been powerless her whole life. Let people make decisions for her, shape her path, define her worth. Garrett, her aunt, the town, Vivian. Maybe it was time to decide something for herself. "Okay," Lila said. "I'll stay." Relief flooded Rafe's face. Yeah, but we do this slow. I need time, as much as you need." Rafe's smile was tentative, but real. "Thank you." They stood in the barn, surrounded by horses and lamplight, and the solid reality of wood and earth. It wasn't romance, wasn't fireworks or grand gestures, just two damaged people choosing to exist in the same space and see what happened. It was enough. The next weeks fell into a rhythm. Lila worked the ranch alongside the hands, and slowly the whispers in town began to fade. People found new scandals to discuss. Vivian and her lawyer left the territory after the federal marshal filed formal charges. Her father's business took a hit when other ranchers started asking uncomfortable questions about labor practices and land deals. And Lila watched it all from a distance, feeling strangely detached. The woman who had stood in that courtroom fighting for her life seemed like someone else now. She was still scared sometimes, still woke up gasping from nightmares about Garrett or Vivian or jail cells. But the fear was manageable, shared. Rafe kept his word about going slow. He didn't push, didn't demand, just worked beside her and made her laugh occasionally, and was there when the nightmares got bad. Matteo and Ren became actual friends instead of just co-workers. Levi and Cole started treating her like one of the hands instead of a curiosity. The ranch felt less like a refuge and more like home. A couple of months after the trial, Lila was working in the barn when she heard unfamiliar voices. She walked outside to find a young couple standing with Rafe, dressed in traveling clothes, looking exhausted. The woman had a baby wrapped against breast. The man held a small girl by the hand. "Lila," Rafe called. "Come here a minute." She approached cautiously. "This is David and Ruth Callahan. Their ranch burned down a few days ago. Lightning strike. They've got nowhere to go." Leela saw it immediately. The desperate hope in their eyes. The shame of having to ask for help. She recognized that look, had worn it herself not long ago. "The bunkhouse has space," Lila said before Rafe could continue. "And we need extra hands for spring branding anyway." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. We can't pay much, not until we rebuild. Room and board plus wages, Lila said firmly. Same as everyone else. You work, you get paid. David looked at Rafe. That acceptable to you, Mr. Donovan? Rafe's eyes met Lila's, something warm and proud in his expression. Lila runs the hiring now. If she says you're in, you're in. After the Callahans settled into the bunkhouse, Rafe found Lila in the barn again. You didn't have to do that, he said. Yes, I did. Lila didn't look at him, focusing on brushing Shadow's coat. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it. Seemed right to pass it along. You know they might not work out. Might cause problems. Might. Lila finally turned to face him. But probably they'll be fine. People usually are when you give them a shot. Rafe studied her face. You're different since the trial. How? Stronger, more settled. He moved closer, like you finally believe you deserve to be here. Lila considered that. Maybe he was right. She didn't wake up every morning waiting for someone to throw her out anymore. Didn't apologize for taking up space. The change was subtle but real. I learned something, she said slowly, about myself, about people. What's that? That running doesn't actually solve anything. I ran from St. Louis, ran from my aunt, even thought about running from here. Lila set down the brush. But the thing about running is you take yourself with you. The fear, the shame, the damage. It doesn't matter where you go. You're still you. So what's the solution? Standing still long enough to heal, Rafe said, letting people help, fighting for what matters instead of just surviving. Lila met his eyes. You taught me that. You and Mateo and Ren and everyone here. You showed me what it looks like when people actually mean what they say. Rafe's throat worked. Lila wasn't done. I said I needed time, and I did, but I've had it now. And I've been thinking about what you said in court, about loving me. Rafe went very still. I think I might love you too, she said. The words came out shakier than she intended. I don't know for sure. I've only loved one other person, and that was my mother, so I don't have much reference. But when I think about leaving here, about not seeing you every day, it hurts. And when Vivian tried to take you away from me, I wanted to burn her whole world down. So if that's love, then yeah, I love you. Rafe's expression cracked open into something raw and hopeful. You sure? Because you don't have to say it just because I did. There's no pressure. Lila kissed him. It wasn't practiced or smooth. She was out of practice and nervous, and her hands shook when they gripped his shirt. But Rafe's arms came around her, solid and sure. And for the first time since Garrett Shaw had destroyed her faith in men, Lila felt safe in someone's embrace. When they finally pulled apart, Both breathing hard, Rafe rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to mess this up sometimes," he said roughly. "I'm stubborn and blunt, and I work too much. Lena used to say I had the emotional range of a fence post." Lila laughed despite herself. "I'm damaged and scared, and I don't trust easy. We're both disasters. Perfect match, then." They stood in the barn, holding each other, while the horses shifted in their stalls, and late afternoon light slanted through the boards. It wasn't a fairy tale, wasn't perfect or uncomplicated. Just two broken people choosing to be broken together and see if they could build something new from the pieces. Lila thought about the woman who had stumbled into this barn months ago, terrified, alone, convinced she had nothing left worth saving. That woman would never have believed this moment was possible, but people could change, grow. Learn to trust again, despite every reason not to. Maybe that was the real gift the frontier gave her. Not freedom from pain, but the space to transform it into something else, something harder and more resilient. As the seasons turned, Lila and Rafe stood together in front of a small crowd in the ranch yard. Not a church this time, no fancy dress or elaborate ceremony, just Lila in a simple blue dress that had belonged to Lena, and Rafe in his best clothes, with his hair actually combed for once. Mateo stood as witness along with Wren, both looking pleased in their different ways. The Callahans were there with their children, Levi and Cole, a few ranchers from neighboring properties who had become allies after Vivian's scandal broke. The minister was the same one who would have married Lila to Garrett Shaw. He had apologized for believing the lies, and Lila had accepted, because holding grudges was exhausting, and life was too short. "Do you, Rafe Donovan, take Lila Whitaker to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Lila Whitaker, take Rafe Donovan to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Lila looked at Rafe's face, weathered and honest and completely hers. Thought about the journey that had brought her here, the betrayal and pain and desperate fight for survival. Thought about the woman she had been and the woman she was becoming. "I do." The minister smiled. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, Mr. Donovan." Rafe did thoroughly, while the small crowd cheered and whistled. When they finally broke apart, Lila was laughing and crying at the same time. This was what a real wedding felt like. Not performance or spectacle, but commitment. Choosing someone every day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. The celebration afterward was simple. Food and music and dancing in the yard. Lila found herself pulled into conversations with people who had shunned her months ago, but were friendly now. Forgiveness came easier when you stopped being scandal and became success. Later, when the sun was setting and most people had drifted away, Lila stood at the paddock fence, watching Shadow and the other horses graze. Rafe appeared beside her, draping his jacket over her shoulders against the evening chill. "Happy?" he asked. Lila considered the question seriously. Was she happy? Not in the uncomplicated way she had imagined happiness as a girl. Not the fairy tale version where everything was perfect and nothing hurt. But there was peace in knowing she had survived the worst and come out stronger. Satisfaction in the ranch she had helped save, the animals she had healed, the people she had earned respect from through hard work instead of charm. Contentment in standing beside a man who had proven his words with actions over and over. "Yeah," she said, "I'm happy." "Good." Rafe pulled her closer. "Because I plan to keep you that way for a very long time." Lila leaned into him, watching the sky turn purple and gold. In the distance, she could hear Mateo laughing at something Ren said. The horses nickered softly. Wood smoke from the dinner fire drifted on the wind. She thought about the girl who had walked out of that church in St. Louis wearing a ruined dress and carrying nothing but shame. That girl had thought her life was over, had believed one man's betrayal defined her worth. She had been wrong. What defined Lila wasn't what Garrett took from her, but what she had built from nothing. Not the town's judgment, but her own resilience. Not the frontier's harshness, but her refusal to let it break her. As the years passed, when people asked about the ranch and how it became known across the territory, Lila would tell them the truth. It wasn't one moment, wasn't a single decision or dramatic rescue. It was the accumulation of small choices. Staying when leaving was easier, fighting when surrender made more sense, trusting again, despite every reason not to, working until her hands bled and her back screamed because animals were depending on her, standing up to people with more power and money because justice mattered more than comfort. The ranch became known as a place where wounded things healed, where people who had been thrown away got second chances, where hard work mattered more than background or breeding or the stories people told about you. Ranchers brought their dying livestock from hundreds of miles away because Lila Donovan had a gift nobody could explain, but everyone respected. Young people fleeing bad situations appeared at the gates, and Lila would look at their desperate faces and see herself in that ruined wedding dress. She always found room for one more. The ranch grew, not into an empire, but into something better, a community. The Callahans rebuilt on neighboring land with money Rafe and Lila lent them. Mateo eventually married a widow from town and brought her 3 children to live in a house Rafe helped him build. Ren started training horses and became known for it across 3 territories. Lila and Rafe's life together wasn't smooth. They fought sometimes about money and decisions and whether they could afford to take in another stray family. Lila still woke from nightmares occasionally, gasping about Garrett or jail cells or Vivian's cold smile. Rafe got moody when stressed, withdrew into work instead of talking. But they learned to weather it, to give each other space when needed and closeness when possible, to say sorry when wrong and mean it, to celebrate the good days and survive the bad ones together. Lila never had children. Her body wouldn't cooperate despite years of trying. And that hurt in ways she couldn't fully articulate. But the ranch filled with other people's children, the Callahans' kids, Mateo's stepchildren, the sons and daughters of hands who came and went. Lila taught them all how to gentle a frightened horse, how to recognize sickness before it showed symptoms, how to survive when the world tried to break them. They called her Aunt Lila, and she loved them fiercely. As the years passed, on a quiet evening when frost still clung to the grass, Rafe gave her the deed to the ranch, her name alongside his, legally binding, equal ownership of everything they had built. "It was always yours anyway," he said, "just making it official." Lila cried, which annoyed her, because she hated crying. But some moments deserved tears. That night, sitting on the porch they had rebuilt together after a storm took the original, Lila thought about the journey that had brought her here, all the pain and fear and desperate struggling, all the moments she had wanted to give up, but hadn't. "Do you think about it?" Rafe asked, reading her mind the way he had learned to do over the years. "About how you ended up here sometimes." Lila leaned against his shoulder. "I used to think Garrett Shaw ruined my life. That being abandoned at that altar was the worst thing that could happen to me. And now," she smiled slightly, "now I think he accidentally saved me." Rafe was quiet for a moment. He was still a bastard, absolutely. But bastards sometimes do you favors without meaning to. Lila's voice was quiet. "He broke me open, and yeah, that hurt worse than anything I'd experienced, but it also meant I had to rebuild from scratch, choose what to keep and what to throw away, decide who I wanted to be instead of who people expected." Rafe was quiet for a moment. "You ever regret it? Choosing this life? It's been hard, brutal," Lila corrected. "But no, I don't regret it. Hard things are usually the things most worth doing." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. In the barn, Shadow nickered softly. Old now, but still healthy. Lila had promised the mare would live out her days in peace, and she had kept that promise. She had kept a lot of promises over the years. To herself, to Rafe, to the people who depended on the ranch for survival. That was what love was, Lila had learned. Not the butterflies and romance of young infatuation, though she and Rafe had that sometimes too. But the daily choosing, the showing up, even when tired, the fighting for each other, and with each other, and alongside each other. The refusing to quit even when quitting would be easier. One evening, years after Lila first stumbled into Rafe's barn, a young woman appeared at the ranch gate. She was perhaps 19, wearing a dress that had once been nice, but was now torn and filthy. Her face was bruised. Her eyes held the same desperate emptiness Lila remembered feeling. "Please," the girl whispered. "I need help. I have nowhere else to go." Lila looked at her and saw herself, saw every person who had ever been broken and discarded, and told they deserved it. "Come inside," Lila said gently. "You're safe here." She led the girl to the house, sat her down, got her food and water, listened to her story. Another man, another betrayal, another escape. The details were different, but the shape was the same. When the girl finished talking, she looked at Lila with hollow eyes. "Everyone says I'm ruined, that no decent person will ever want me now, that I should just accept what happened and be grateful for whatever scraps I can get." Lila felt rage burn through her, old and familiar. The same rage she had felt when Vivian called her worthless, when the town whispered she deserved abandonment, when men tried to kill her just for existing. "You're not ruined," Lila said firmly. "You're surviving, and survival is the first step toward everything else." "But how do I?" The girl's voice cracked. "How do I stop feeling like this, like I'm worthless?" Lila thought about that question, about all the easy answers people gave that meant nothing, about the hard truth she had learned through years of bleeding and fighting and refusing to quit. "You don't stop feeling it," Lila said honestly. "Not right away. Maybe not for a long time. But you make different choices. You decide that other people's judgment doesn't define you. You find work that matters, people who see your worth, places where you belong, and slowly, piece by piece, you build a new life, one that's yours, one nobody can take away." "What if I can't? What if I'm not strong enough?" "You're strong enough." Lila gripped the girl's hand. "You know how I know. Because you made it here. You survived whatever happened and found the courage to ask for help. That's not weakness. That's the beginning of strength." The girl started crying, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Lila held her, letting her break apart in a safe place. Sometimes you had to fall completely before you could start climbing back up. Later, after the girl fell asleep in the spare room, Lila walked out to the barn. Rafe found her there, standing with Shadow the way she always did when she needed to think. "Another one?" he asked. "Another one. You can't save them all, you know." Lila smiled slightly. "I know, but I can save this one, and maybe that's enough." Rafe pulled her close. "You've built something good here, something important. I hope you know that." Lila did know, not in the arrogant way, but in the quiet certainty that came from years of work. The ranch wasn't perfect. They still struggled with money sometimes, with drought and disease, and all the things that tried to kill frontier life. But they survived. More than survived. They thrived in their own way, and people knew across the territory. When someone was desperate and broken, and had nowhere else to turn, they pointed them toward the Donovan Ranch, toward Lila, who had been broken herself and learned to build something better from the pieces. That was her legacy. Not wealth or fame or comfort, but the simple knowledge that she had helped people survive when survival seemed impossible. That she had proven worth wasn't determined by who wanted you or who threw you away, but by what you chose to build and who you chose to be. On her last day, and it would come eventually, though not for many years yet, Lila knew she would have no regrets. She had lived fully, loved honestly, fought hard, made mistakes and learned from them, built something lasting from nothing but stubbornness and the refusal to let the world's judgment define her. The woman who had walked into that barn wearing a ruined wedding dress would have been proud, and maybe, Lila thought as she stood in the lamplight with Rafe's arms around her, and a frightened girl sleeping safe in their house, and horses breathing softly in their stalls. Maybe that woman would also be surprised, because she had thought her story was ending that night in the barn, but really, it was just beginning. The frontier had tried to break her. The world had thrown everything it could at her: betrayal, violence, lies, prison, poverty, scorn. And Lila Whitaker Donovan had survived it all, not by being perfect or invulnerable, but by being stubborn and refusing to quit, and learning that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is ask for help. She had found home in the last place she expected, found love with a man who proved words with actions, found purpose in healing animals and helping people and building something that mattered. And if a girl in a ruined wedding dress could do that, then anyone could. That was the real lesson, the one Lila would spend the rest of her life teaching to every broken person who stumbled through her gates. You're not defined by what breaks you. You're defined by what you build afterward. And sometimes the thing that nearly destroys you ends up being exactly what you needed to become, who you were always meant to be. Lila smiled into the darkness, holding tight to the man she loved, and the life she had earned through blood and sweat and sheer determination. The barn door stood open behind her, the same door she had stumbled through all those years ago. But she wasn't stumbling anymore. She was home.